My son thought he was smart hiding a package of lethal drugs in my fishing gear while my back was turned. He thought I was just a senile old man staring blankly at his morning coffee. He thought he had planned the perfect crime to send his own father to prison and steal my life savings. But he was wrong. I watched his every move in the reflection of the microwave door. I saw his shaking hands. I saw the sweat on his forehead. And when he stepped out of the room, I made a move that would change the history of our family forever. 30 minutes later, as I drove my old truck down the highway, I watched in the rearview mirror as my son was handcuffed face down on the asphalt. I didn't stop. I didn't turn back. I just turned up the radio and kept driving. I am Elijah Banks, 68 years old, and I learned a long time ago that sometimes the snake that bites you is the one you raised in your own backyard. Before I tell you how I destroyed my own son to save my dignity, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Like and subscribe if you believe respect must be earned, not given. It was 4:30 in the morning on a Saturday in Chicago. The winter wind, which we call the hawk, was howling outside, rattling the window panes of the house I had bought with 40 years of sweat from the auto plant. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, the steam rising up and disappearing into the cold air. The house was dark lit only by the digital clock on the microwave and the faint orange glow of the street lamp outside. I liked the quiet. It reminded me of the shifts before the assembly line started moving, that brief moment of peace before the noise began. But this morning the peace was fake. My son Tyrell was in the kitchen with me. He was 32 years old, wearing a tracksuit that cost more than my first car, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. He told me he wanted to go fishing. He said he wanted to bond with his old man. It had been years since Tyrell had wanted to do anything with me that did not involve asking for money. He claimed he was an entrepreneur now, investing in things I did not understand, but I knew the look of a man who was drowning. I had seen it on the factory floor when guys gambled away their paychecks. Tyrell had that look. I took a sip of my coffee and kept my eyes fixed on the black glass of the microwave oven. It acted like a perfect mirror in the dark kitchen. Tyrell thought I was staring at the wall, lost in thought. In reality, I was watching him behind me. He was standing by the back door where I had stacked our gear. My old battered tackle box was sitting on top of the cooler. It was a sturdy plastic box I had used since Tyrell was a boy, filled with lures, hooks, and tangled fishing line. I watched the reflection as Tyrell looked at the back of my head to make sure I wasn't looking. Then, with a speed that made my stomach turn, he opened the latch of my tackle box. He reached into the pocket of his expensive jacket and pulled out a brick-sized package wrapped tightly in black electrical tape. It was thick, heavy, and ominous. He shoved it deep into the bottom of my box, burying it under the spools of extra line and the rusty pliers. He snapped the latch shut and let out a breath that fogged the air. He wiped his hands on his pants as if they were dirty. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. A cold calm settled over me, the same calm I felt when I was a foreman and had to deal with dangerous machinery malfunctions. Panic gets you killed. Observation keeps you alive. I took another sip of coffee and turned around slowly in my chair. Tyrell jumped slightly. "You ready to go, son?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Tyrell forced a smile. It was a brittle, ugly thing. "Yeah, Pops. Just checking the gear. We should head out. The fish bite early." His voice was too high. He was sweating despite the cold draft in the kitchen. Suddenly he clutched his stomach. "You know what, Pops, give me 5 minutes. My stomach is acting up. Must be the nerves. I have not been fishing in so long." He rushed out of the kitchen and toward the bathroom down the hall. I heard the door lock click. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was hiding. He could not look me in the eye because he knew what he had just done. He needed a moment to compose himself to practice the lies he would tell me in the car. I had 5 minutes, maybe less. I stood up. My knees popped, a reminder of the years of standing on concrete, but I moved with purpose. I walked to the tackle box and unlatched it. I dug past the lures and the line until my fingers brushed against the cold, smooth plastic of the package. I pulled it out. It was heavier than I expected. I used my pocket knife to make a tiny slit in the tape, just enough to see what was inside. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. I saw the glint of foil blister packs. I saw the labels. Hospital-grade fentanyl. High dosage. Strictly controlled. This was not recreational. This was thousands of dollars worth of death. This was a felony that would put a black man of my age in prison until he died. I understood the plan instantly. Tyrell wasn't taking me fishing. He was using me as a mule. We would drive separately as we often did because he refused to get his car dirty. He would make sure I got stopped. The police would find this in my truck. I would take the fall. He would claim ignorance, and whatever debt he was trying to pay off with this package would be settled by sacrificing his own father. I looked at the bathroom door down the hall. I could hear the water running. I taped the slit shut. I did not feel anger. Not yet. I felt a profound sense of clarity. The boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to tie a tie and throw a baseball, was gone. In his place was a predator who saw me as prey. I grabbed the package and walked out the back door into the garage. The cold air hit my face, sharpening my senses. My old Ford pickup truck was parked next to Tyrell's leased Dodge Challenger. He was so proud of that car. He polished it more than he visited his own son, Leo. I tried the handle of the Challenger. It was unlocked. Tyrell was arrogant. He thought he was untouchable in this house. I slid into the driver's seat of his car. It smelled of expensive leather and stale cologne. I reached under the seat. I knew this car. I knew that the plastic casing under the driver's seat had a tendency to come loose on this model because I had fixed it for him 3 months ago. I pried the plastic panel back. There was a hollow space there right next to the seat tracks. I shoved the brick of drugs deep into the cavity. It fit perfectly. I snapped the plastic panel back into place. It looked untouched. I got out of his car and wiped the handle with the hem of my shirt. I went back to my tackle box. I grabbed a bag of old lead sinkers, heavy weights we used for bottom fishing, and wrapped them in a rag. I shoved them into the bottom of the box where the drugs had been. The weight felt exactly the same. I latched the box. I was back at the kitchen table with my coffee when the toilet flushed. Tyrell came back into the kitchen. He looked paler than before, but he had regained his composure. He clapped his hands together. "All right, Pops, let's do this. You take the truck with the gear, right? I don't want that fish smell in the Challenger. I have a client meeting later." I looked at him. I looked at the son who had just sentenced me to death in a cage. "You sure you don't want to ride with me, Tyrell?" "We could talk." He shook his head quickly. "No, I need to make some calls on the way. Business never sleeps right. You lead the way. I will follow you." I nodded. "Okay, son. You follow me." We walked out to the garage. I picked up the tackle box. I saw Tyrell's eyes dart to it, checking to make sure it was still heavy. He saw the strain in my arm and relaxed. He thought he had won. He thought the trap was set. I tossed the box into the bed of my truck. I climbed in and started the engine. It roared to life, a reliable sound in a world of lies. Tyrell got into his sports car. The engine purred aggressively. I backed out of the driveway. Tyrell followed. We drove through the quiet suburban streets of Chicago, heading toward the interstate. The sky was beginning to turn a bruised purple as dawn approached. I drove exactly at the speed limit. I checked my rearview mirror. Tyrell was right behind me, following close. Too close. He wanted to make sure I didn't make any unexpected turns. We merged onto the highway. Traffic was light. I stayed in the right lane. Tyrell stayed behind me for a mile. Then he moved to the left lane to pass me, probably to speed up and get some distance so he wouldn't be associated with me when the inevitable happened. But he didn't know about the other adjustment I had made. The night before, when he arrived and parked in my driveway, I had noticed a loose wire on his rear tail light. I could have fixed it in 2 seconds. Instead, while he was inside asking for a beer, I had reached in and disconnected the fuse for his rear running lights entirely. In the dark of the early morning, his car was a violation on wheels. I saw it happen in slow motion. A state trooper was sitting in the median turnover lights off. As Tyrell zoomed past him in the left lane, the trooper saw the dark taillights. The engine of the police interceptor roared. The blue and red lights exploded into the darkness, blinding in my rearview mirror. Tyrell didn't pull over immediately. I could see his brake lights flicker. He was panicking. He thought the plan was for me to get stopped, not him. He probably thought he was being pulled over for speeding. He eventually swerved to the shoulder, kicking up gravel. I did not slow down. I maintained my speed. As I passed them, I looked to my left. The trooper was already out of his car, hand on his holster, shouting at Tyrell to keep his hands on the wheel. Tyrell looked terrified. He looked small. I knew what would happen next. They would run his license. They would see his record of unpaid tickets. They would have probable cause to search the car because Tyrell acted nervous when he was guilty. And they would find the package. Not in my truck, but in the car of the man who put it there. My phone started ringing on the dashboard. The screen lit up with Tyrell's name. I let it ring. I watched the scene disappear in my rearview mirror until the blue lights were just a faint pulse in the distance. I took the next exit and turned the truck around. I wasn't going fishing. I was going back to the house to change the locks. The war had started and I intended to finish it. This was just the first battle. Tyrell thought he was playing a game with a confused old man. He was about to find out that the old man had been navigating chaos since before he was born. I arrived back at my driveway as the sun finally broke over the horizon. The house looked the same, but it felt different. It was no longer a home. It was a fortress. I walked into the kitchen and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. It was cold. Then the landline on the wall rang. I knew who it was. I picked it up. Dad. Dad, you have to help me. It was Tyrell. His voice was high and cracking, surrounded by the background noise of a busy precinct. I pretended to be confused. Tyrell. Where are you? We are supposed to be at the lake. Why aren't you behind me? Dad, listen to me. The cops. They pulled me over. They found something in the car. It's not mine. You have to come down here. You have to tell them it's a mistake. You have to bail me out. I sat down in my chair. I looked at the microwave reflection again. I saw a man who was alone, but safe. I don't know what you are talking about, son, I said calmly. I checked my tackle box. Everything seems to be in order here. If you have something in your car that shouldn't be there, that sounds like a problem between you and the law. Dad, please. It's serious. They are talking about distribution charges. They are talking about 10 years. 10 years, I repeated. That is a long time. Maybe enough time to think about who you try to cross. I hung up the phone. I did not feel joy. I felt a heavy stone in my chest. But I also felt the steel in my spine stiffen. I knew this wasn't over. Tyrell was just the delivery boy. The architect of this disaster was his wife, Paige, and she would be coming for me next. I heard a car screech into the driveway. I looked out the window. It was Paige. She slammed her car door and stormed toward the house. She didn't look worried about her husband. She looked like a woman who had lost her winning lottery ticket. I unlocked the front door and stood in the frame blocking her path. She stopped at the bottom of the steps, her eyes wild. "Where is it?" she screamed. "Where is the box, Elijah?" I looked down at her. "The box is safe, Paige. The question is, are you?" She froze. The look on her face shifted from anger to fear. She realized then that the game had changed. The senile old grandfather was gone. The man who stood before her was the man who had survived riots, layoffs, and the death of his wife. "Get off my property," I said, "before I call the police and tell them exactly where that package came from." She glared at me, her hands balled into fists. "You are making a mistake, old man. You don't know who we owe money to. If Tyrell doesn't pay, they come for all of us, including you, and including Leo." She turned and ran back to her car. I watched her drive away. She had played her hand. She admitted there was a debt. She admitted there was a they. And she threatened my grandson. I went inside and locked the door. I went to the closet and pulled out the old shoebox where I kept my burner phone and the contact number for Jerome, my old friend who used to be a private investigator. I dialed the number. "Jerome," I said when he answered. "It's Eli. I need you to dig. My son just tried to frame me for drug trafficking to pay off a debt. I need to know who he owes and I need to know how much. And Jerome, bring your peace. I think I'm going to have visitors tonight." I hung up and sat in the dark hallway watching the door. My son was in jail. My daughter-in-law was a conspirator. My grandson was in danger. And I was the only one left standing to fix it. I wasn't going anywhere. Let them come. I walked into my kitchen and locked the deadbolt behind me. The silence of the house felt heavy, but it was a weight I was used to carrying. I hung my keys on the hook by the door, right where they had hung for 30 years. My hands were steady. I washed them in the sink, scrubbing away the grease from Tyrell's car and the invisible stain of his betrayal. I dried them on a dish towel, and then I did what I did every Saturday morning. I made breakfast. I poured grits into a pot of boiling water. I cracked 2 eggs into a cast-iron skillet that had belonged to my wife Bernice. The smell of frying butter and cornmeal filled the air, replacing the cold scent of the garage. I was not going to let my son's foolishness ruin my routine. Routine was what kept a man sane when the world tried to tear him apart. I sat down at the table and ate slowly. Every bite was a defiance. I was chewing, swallowing, and breathing, which was more than Tyrell had planned for me today. I was supposed to be in the back of a squad car. I was supposed to be answering questions about a brick of fentanyl. Instead, I was here in my castle eating my eggs. Then the phone rang. It was the landline on the wall. The shrill sound cut through the quiet like a circular saw. I let it ring 3 times before I stood up. I knew who it was. I picked up the receiver and held it to my ear without saying a word. "Dad. Dad, are you there?" It was Tyrell. His voice was a high-pitched mess of panic and static. I could hear the chaos of the precinct in the background, phones ringing, doors slamming, heavy voices shouting orders. "Hello," I said. My voice was calm, the voice of a man who had just finished a good breakfast. "Dad, why didn't you answer your cell?" "I have been calling for 20 minutes. I am in jail. You have to listen to me. It is all a mistake. A huge mistake." I was set up. I leaned against the wall and looked at the clock. It was 7:15. "In jail," I repeated slowly, letting the confusion seep into my tone. "Tyrell, you're not making any sense. You left here an hour ago. You said you were going to the lake. Did you get a speeding ticket?" "No, Dad, listen to me. It is not a ticket. It is possession, distribution. They found drugs in the car, in the Challenger, under the seat. I don't know how they got there. Someone put them there." I closed my eyes for a second. The lie came so easily to him. Even now, facing felony charges, he could not tell me the truth. He could not say I tried to frame you and it backfired. He just kept spinning the web. "Drugs," I said, making my voice sound old and weary. "Son, I told you about those energy pills you take. They are not good for your heart." "It is not energy pills," he screamed, his voice cracking. "It is fentanyl, a whole brick of it. Dad, you have to come down here. You have to bail me out. You have to bring money. Call Paige. Tell her to bring the savings. Tell her to mortgage the house if she has to. I cannot stay in here. The guys in here, they know I am not built for this." I pulled the receiver away from my ear as he shouted. I looked at it with disgust. He was begging me to mortgage the house he had tried to steal. The audacity was breathtaking. "I am having trouble hearing you, son," I said. "The line is bad. You say you want me to call Paige." "Yes, call Paige. Tell her to get the money." "I will call her," I said. "But I don't think I can drive down there today. My knees are acting up with this cold weather. You know how it gets." "Dad, no. Do not do this to me." The line went dead. The automated system cut him off. I hung up the phone. I did not call Paige. I did not have to. I knew she was already on her way. A predator knows when its trap has been sprung, and when the trap comes up empty, the predator comes looking for the bait. I sat back down and finished my coffee. I had about 10 minutes by my calculation. Paige drove fast when she was angry. I heard the tires screech in the driveway exactly 9 minutes later. I didn't get up. I heard the car door slam with a force that shook the front window. Then I heard the rapid, angry clicking of heels on the concrete walkway. She didn't knock. She had a key, a spare I had given Tyrell years ago for emergencies. The lock turned aggressively and the door flew open. Paige stood there. She was a small woman with sharp features and blonde hair that was always perfectly styled, but today she looked unhinged. Her eyes were wide and wild. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin sweater despite the freezing temperature. She didn't look at me. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask about her husband. She walked right past me, her eyes scanning the living room, the kitchen counters, the floor. She was hunting. "Where is it?" she hissed. I turned in my chair to watch her. "Good morning to you too, Paige. To what do I owe the pleasure?" She spun around, her face twisted in a snarl. "Don't play games with me, Elijah. Tyrell called me. He said the cops found the package in his car. That package was in your tackle box. I saw him put it there." She covered her mouth instantly, realizing she had said too much. But she didn't care. The desperation was radiating off her in waves. She dropped the pretense. She turned and ran toward the door that led to the garage. I stood up and followed her. I moved slowly, deliberately. I watched as she burst into the garage. The cold air hit us both. My tackle box was sitting on the workbench where I had left it. Paige lunged for it. She didn't open the latches carefully. She ripped them open. She grabbed the box and turned it upside down. The contents crashed onto the concrete floor. Lead sinkers, colorful lures, spools of fishing line, sharp hooks and bobbers scattered everywhere, rolling under the truck, bouncing off her expensive boots. She fell to her knees, frantically clawing through the mess. She picked up the rag I had wrapped the sinkers in and shook it out. Nothing but lead weights fell out. She let out a scream that was pure primal frustration. It was the sound of a woman watching $200,000 evaporate. She threw the empty plastic box against the wall. It cracked and fell to the floor, broken just like her plan. She stood up and turned to face me. Her chest was heaving. Her face was red. The mask of the polite, successful real estate agent was gone. In its place was a cornered animal. "What did you do with it?" she screamed. She marched toward me, pointing a manicured finger in my face. "You old fool. You senile, useless old man. What did you do with the package? Did you flush it? Did you throw it in the trash? Tell me." I stood my ground. I was 6 feet 2 inches of retired steelworker. She was 5 feet 4 inches of desperate greed. I looked down at her and I didn't blink. "I cleaned my tackle box," I said calmly. "I found some trash in the bottom. I disposed of it." "Trash," she shrieked. "That was our life. That was our future. Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you have any idea who we are dealing with?" I looked at the mess on the floor. I looked at the hooks and the tangled line. It looked like a metaphor for their lives. "I know exactly what I did," I said. "I took out the garbage. And now my son is in jail because he decided to carry that garbage in his own car." Paige stared at me. Her eyes narrowed. She realized then that I wasn't confused. She realized I wasn't the helpless old man she had mocked behind my back. She realized I had outsmarted them. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew the whole time." I didn't answer. I just looked at her. "You did this on purpose," she said, her voice rising again. "You put it in his car. You sent your own son to prison. My son tried to send me to prison," I replied, my voice dropping an octave, turning into the low rumble I used when I had to fire a man for drinking on the job. "He tried to frame me. He tried to ruin me. I just returned his property." Paige stepped back. Fear flickered across her face, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard malice. She straightened her sweater. She took a deep breath and composed herself. When she looked at me again, her eyes were dead. "Fine," she said. "You want to play hardball, Elijah? Let's play. You think you won because Tyrell is in a cell. You haven't won anything. Tyrell is weak. He will break, but I won't." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. "You have no idea what is coming for you," she hissed. "Tyrell owes money. A lot of money. And if he doesn't pay, they come for the collateral. Do you know what the collateral is?" I waited. "It's this house," she said, looking around the garage. "And it's you. And if you think you can sit here and judge us, you are wrong. You are going to lose everything. Your pension, your savings, this dump of a house." She smiled, a cruel, thin smile. "And if you don't help us get Tyrell out, if you don't sell this place and pay what is owed, you will never see Leo again. I will take your grandson so far away you won't even find him on a map. I will tell him his grandfather is a criminal who put his daddy in jail. I will make sure he hates you until the day you die alone in this cold, empty house." The mention of Leo hit me hard. He was 7 years old. He was innocent. He was the only good thing that had come from this toxic union. She knew he was my weakness. She was holding a child hostage to cover her crimes. I felt a heat rise in my chest, a fire that I hadn't felt since the riots in the 80s. I took a step forward. Paige flinched. She saw something in my face that made her realize she had pushed too far. "Get out," I said. "What?" she stammered. I pointed to the open garage door. "Get out of my house. Get off my property." "You can't kick me out," she said, her voice wavering. "I am family." "You stopped being family the moment you tried to turn me into a mule," I roared. My voice echoed off the concrete walls. "You are a stranger. You are a thief. And if you are not off my driveway in 10 seconds, I am calling the police and I am telling them exactly who came looking for the drugs in Tyrell's car." She stared at me, weighing her options. She looked at the phone in my hand. She looked at the determination in my eyes. She knew I would do it. "Fine," she spat. "Enjoy your victory, old man. It will be your last." She turned and marched back to her car. She got in and slammed the door. She reversed out of the driveway so fast she scraped the bottom of her bumper on the curb. I watched her speed away down the street, blowing through the stop sign at the corner. I stood in the garage for a long time. The cold wind bit through my flannel shirt, but I didn't feel it. I looked at the scattered fishing gear on the floor. I bent down and picked up a single lead sinker. It was heavy and cold in my hand. I walked back into the house and locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I checked the windows. Then I went to the hall closet and reached up to the top shelf. I pulled down an old shoebox hidden behind the winter coats. Inside was a burner phone and a small notebook with one number written in it. Jerome. Jerome was a retired private investigator I had known since Vietnam. He was the kind of man who knew how to find things that didn't want to be found. He was the kind of man who didn't ask questions until the job was done. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. "Yeah," a gravelly voice answered. "Jerome, it's Eli," I said. "Eli Jerome," said, his voice warming slightly. "It has been a minute. Everything good?" "No," I said. "Nothing is good. My son just tried to frame me for a felony. His wife just threatened to take my grandson and burn my life down. I need you to work. Tell me what you need." Jerome said, his tone shifting instantly to business. "I need you to find out everything I said. I need to know who Tyrell owes money to. I need to know how deep this hole is. And I need you to find out what Paige is really up to. She searched my garage like she knew exactly what she was looking for. She is not just a wife. She is a partner." "I am on it," Jerome said. "Give me 24 hours. And Jerome," I added, "bring your piece when you come over. I think things are going to get ugly before they get better." I heard the metallic click of a slide being racked on the other end of the line. "I will be there in an hour, Eli. Sit tight." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty street. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the lawn I had mowed for 40 years. My son was in jail. My daughter-in-law was an enemy. My grandson was a pawn. I was 68 years old. I was tired. My joints ached. But as I stood there watching the street, I made a promise to my dead wife. I would not let them win. I would not let them take this house. And I would not let them destroy Leo. I went to the kitchen and poured the cold coffee down the drain. I made a fresh pot. It was going to be a long day. I was expecting Jerome. I was expecting an old friend with a revolver and a bottle of whiskey to help me guard my fortress. But when the pounding on my front door started 40 minutes later, it did not sound like a friend. It sounded like a battering ram. I opened the door before they could break it down. There were 6 of them. Uniformed officers and 2 detectives in cheap suits. They did not ask permission. They pushed past me, their boots heavy on the hardwood floors I had polished just yesterday. One of them, a man with a thick neck and eyes that had seen too much, shoved a paper into my chest. "Search warrant," he barked. "Sit down, Mr. Banks. Keep your hands where we can see them." I sat on my recliner. I did not argue. I knew the drill. I had seen it enough times in the neighborhood. But this time the invasion was personal. "Why are you tearing apart my house, detective?" I asked calmly, watching a uniformed officer dump my book collection onto the floor. The detective with the thick neck stood over me. His name was Miller, according to his badge. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Your son is trying to cut a deal, Elijah. He says the fentanyl we found in his car belongs to you. He says you have been using again. He says he took it from you this morning to stop you from hurting yourself. He says he is just a good son, trying to protect his addict father." I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my throat, but I swallowed it. It tasted like bile. Tyrell was creative. I had to give him that. He knew I took pain medication for my knees years ago after a surgery. He was twisting that history, turning a closed chapter into a current crime. He was selling me out to save his own skin. He was willing to let his father die in prison so he could walk free. "Check the garage," Miller yelled to his team. "Check the vents. Check the toilet tanks." I watched them violate my home. They pulled the cushions off the sofa Bernice had picked out. They emptied the flour and sugar canisters in the kitchen onto the counter. They ripped the backing off the framed photos of Tyrell's graduation. I sat still. My hands were folded in my lap. I knew what they would find. Nothing. My house was clean. My conscience was clean. But my heart was heavy. Every item they broke was a memory of the family I thought I had. They spent an hour turning my life upside down. They came back from the garage with my tackle box. They dumped it out again just like Paige had done. Nothing but hooks and sinkers. Miller kicked a lure across the floor in frustration. "We are wasting our time," one of the uniforms muttered. "The old man is clean. The kid is lying." Miller didn't look convinced. He walked over to me. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. He smelled of stale coffee and aggression. "Where is it, Elijah? Tyrell says you hide it in the walls. He says you are losing it. He says you forget where you put things. Help us help you. If you are sick, we can get you treatment." I looked him in the eye. "My son is a liar, detective, and he is a coward. I have not touched a pill in 10 years. You can test my blood. You can test my hair. You will find nothing but coffee and cholesterol medication." Miller straightened up. He looked around the wrecked living room. He seemed to be reconsidering. But then a shout came from the back of the house. It was from my study, the small room where I kept my bills and my old manuals from the plant. "Detective, you need to see this." Miller walked away. I stayed in the chair. I heard them murmuring in the study. I heard paper rustling. A feeling of dread crept up my neck. I knew I didn't have drugs, but I also knew Paige. And I knew she had been in this house many times when I wasn't looking. Miller came back into the living room. He was holding a manila folder. He wasn't looking at me with aggression anymore. He was looking at me with something far worse. He was looking at me with pity. He held up the folder. "Mr. Banks, do you know what this is?" I squinted. I didn't recognize the folder. "No," I said. "It was on your desk," Miller said softly. "Right on top." He opened it. It was a stack of glossy brochures and forms. I saw the logo on the top page, a rising sun over a green field. Sunrise Memory Care Facility. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Miller pulled out a document from the folder. It was an intake form. It was filled out in blue ink. "It says here you applied for residency last week, Elijah. It says you are voluntarily surrendering your financial autonomy due to advancing dementia. It says you have had several incidents of leaving the gas on and wandering the streets at night." He turned the page around so I could see the bottom. "Is this your signature?" I looked at the signature. It was my name. It was my loop on the E and my sharp cross on the T. But it was shaky. It looked like the signature of a man whose hands trembled, a man who was weak. I looked up at Miller. "I did not sign that." Miller sighed. He rubbed his face with his hand. "Mr. Banks, your son told us about this. He said you were planning to check yourself in. He said you knew you were getting bad. He said that is why you had the drugs. To manage the pain, to manage the confusion." I looked at the papers. This was the backup plan. If the drugs didn't put me in jail, the dementia would put me in a home. They would lock me away in a room with a view of a parking lot, medicate me until I drooled, and sell my house out from under me. Paige had planted this. She must have done it days ago, waiting for the right moment to use it. The officer behind Miller spoke up. "He seems confused, Detective." "Maybe the son is right. Look at this place. He lives alone. Maybe he forgot he signed it." They were talking about me like I wasn't there, like I was a piece of furniture that had outlived its usefulness. They saw a black man in a working-class neighborhood with a house that was too big for him, and they saw a tragedy waiting to happen. They didn't see the man who had managed a floor of 200 workers. They didn't see the man who had balanced the books for the union. I stood up. The officers' tensed hands drifting to their belts. "Sit down, Mr. Banks," Miller warned. "I am going to my computer," I said. I pointed to the laptop sitting on the coffee table, buried under a pile of magazines they had knocked over. "What for?" Miller asked. "To show you that my memory is just fine," I said, "and to show you how a snake gets into the henhouse." I sat on the sofa and opened the laptop. It was an old machine, heavy and slow, but it worked. I typed in my password. My fingers did not shake. "You think I am senile, Detective," I said as the screen flickered to life. "You think I don't notice when things move in my own house? You think I didn't notice when $20 went missing from my wallet last month? Or when my spare keys disappeared?" I clicked on an icon on the desktop. It was a security program. "I installed this 2 weeks ago," I said. "I bought 3 small cameras online. They look like smoke detectors. I put one in the kitchen, one in the garage, and one in my study, because I knew someone was stealing from me. I just didn't want to believe it was family." Miller walked around the coffee table and stood behind me. The other officers gathered around. I clicked on the library of recorded footage. I scrolled back to Tuesday. That was the day I had gone to the dentist. I was gone for 2 hours. "Here," I said. I clicked play. The video was grainy but clear enough. The timestamp showed 10:15 a.m. The angle looked down from the ceiling of my study. The room was empty for a moment. Then the door opened. Paige walked in. She wasn't wearing a coat. She looked comfortable, like she owned the place. She walked straight to my desk. She didn't look confused. She looked efficient. She pulled the manila folder from her large purse. She placed it on the desk. Then she sat down in my chair. She swiveled it back and forth, testing it. She picked up one of my pens. She pulled a piece of scrap paper from her pocket and started writing on it. She was practicing. She wrote, paused, looked at a document she had brought with her, likely an old check of mine, and wrote again. Then she pulled the intake form toward her. She signed it slowly, deliberately, making her hand shake to mimic the tremor of an old man. She blew on the ink to dry it. Then she placed the folder right in the center of the desk on top of my utility bills. She stood up, smiled at the empty room, and walked out. I hit pause. The image of Paige's smiling face froze on the screen. I looked up at Miller. The pity was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by the hard, cold look of a hunter who realizes he has been chasing the wrong prey. "That is my daughter-in-law, Paige," I said. "She does not live here. She does not have a key, or at least I never gave her one. And as you can see, she is very good at forgery." Miller stared at the screen. He looked at the fake signature on the paper in his hand. He looked back at the video. "Can I get a copy of this file, Mr. Banks?" he asked. His voice was different now, respectful. "Take the whole computer," I said. "There is more. Check the footage from the garage. You might see her scouting my tackle box last week, too." Miller signaled to the uniform. "Bag the laptop, evidence." He turned back to me. "Mr. Banks, I apologize for the mess. We are going to need you to come down to the station, not as a suspect, as a witness." I stood up. I looked at the wreckage of my home. Books, torn, photos smashed, the sanctity of my life violated by the lies of my own blood. "I will come," I said, "but first I need to make a phone call. I need to call my lawyer, and I need to call a locksmith, because nobody is getting into this house again unless I invite them." Miller nodded. "Take your time, sir. We will wait outside." They filed out of the house, their mood somber. They knew they had been played. They knew they had been used as a weapon by a son against his father. I picked up the phone and dialed Jerome. "They just left," I said. "They didn't find the drugs, but they found a fake application for a nut house. Paige planted it. I caught her on camera." "Good," Jerome said. "That buys us time. But Eli, I found something. I dug into the debt. It is worse than we thought." "Tell me," I said. "It's the Russians, Eli. Or guys who want to be Russians. Hardcore loan sharks out of the South Side. They don't just break legs, they burn things down. Tyrell owes them 200 grand. And the collateral he put up wasn't his car." "What was it?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "It was your house, Eli. He gave them the deed, or at least a forgery of it. They think they own your property if he doesn't pay by Monday." "Monday," I repeated. "That is in 2 days." "Yeah," Jerome said. "And since Tyrell is in jail and the drugs are gone, they are going to come to collect from the next available owner. You need to be ready." I looked at the front door where the police were waiting. I looked at the shattered picture frame of me and Tyrell on a fishing trip when he was 10. "I am ready, Jerome," I said. "I have been ready for a long time." I hung up. I grabbed my coat. I walked out to the police car. The war had moved from my living room to the streets, and I was going to finish it. I came back from the police station feeling like a man walking through a dream he could not wake up from. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a tomb, not a sanctuary. I sat in my armchair, the leather cold against my back, and stared at the front door. I was waiting for the locksmith, but deep down I knew I was waiting for her. Paige, the architect of my ruin. It didn't take long. A car pulled up, but this time there was no screeching of tires, no slamming doors. Just a slow, heavy engine shut off and then hesitant footsteps on the porch. She knocked. It was a soft, pleading sound. I opened the door. Paige was on her knees before I even turned the handle fully. She was a mess. Her mascara ran in black rivers down her cheeks. Her expensive sweater was snagged. She looked up at me, her hands clasped together like she was praying to a god she didn't believe in. "Please, Elijah," she sobbed. "You have to let me in. They are watching. They are going to kill us." I stepped back and let her crawl into the hallway. I didn't offer her a hand. I didn't offer her a chair. I watched her collapse on the rug, weeping into her hands. It was a pathetic display, but I had learned to look past the tears to see the teeth. "Talk," I said. "And if you lie to me one more time, I am putting you out on the curb for whoever is watching." She took a ragged breath. "It is Tyrell," she choked out. "He messed up Elijah. He messed up so bad. It started with the online poker, just small amounts. Then he thought he could make it back with crypto. He leveraged everything. He lost it all." "How much?" I asked. My voice was flat. $200,000, she whispered. I felt the number hit me like a physical blow. 200,000. That was more than my pension. That was a lifetime of overtime. He borrowed it from the wrong people. She continued, the words spilling out of her now like vomit. "We tried to pay the interest. We sold my jewelry. We maxed out the credit cards. But they want the principal. They said if we didn't pay by Sunday, they would hurt us. They sent pictures of Leo walking into school. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with terror. The package was the only way out, she said. They gave Tyrell a choice, move the product or pay the money. It was just one run, just one drop-off. It would have cleared 50 grand of the debt. It would have bought us time. I looked at this woman, this mother of my grandson, and I felt nothing but cold contempt. You brought drug dealers into my life because your husband wanted to play big shot. You put a target on my back. We didn't have a choice, she wailed. You always have a choice, I said. You chose greed. No, Elijah? You don't understand, she said, scrambling to her feet, trying to grab my arm. I pulled away. We didn't want you to get hurt. That is why we put it in your box. I stopped. The logic didn't track. If they didn't want me to get hurt, they wouldn't have involved me. Explain that, I said. How does framing me protect me? She froze. She realized she had walked into a trap of her own making. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lie. But she was too tired to invent one. The truth, Paige, I warned. We knew you would get pulled over, she whispered. We were going to call in a tip on your truck. An anonymous tip about an erratic driver. My blood turned to ice. You were going to call the police on me. Yes, she said, tears streaming again. Because if you got caught, nothing bad would happen to you. You are Elijah Banks. You are 68. You are a retired foreman. You have no record. You are a pillar of the community. They would think you were senile. They would think someone took advantage of you. You would get probation, maybe house arrest. And the drugs, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The drugs would be seized, she said. They would be in an evidence locker. And that helps you how? Because it is a loss, she said. In their world, if the cops take it, it's a write-off. It's a cost of doing business. It's not like we stole it. It's not like we lost it. It's a seizure. The debt doesn't go away, but the clock resets. They wouldn't kill us for a police seizure. They would just make us work it off. We were trading your clean record for our lives. I stared at her. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was precise. It was calculated. They had sat at their kitchen table, probably while my grandson was sleeping in the next room, and they had weighed my dignity against their debt. They decided that my legacy, my good name, the respect I had built over 40 years was a currency they could spend. They were willing to brand me a felon, to have me handcuffed on the side of the road, to have my neighbors watch me get hauled away just to buy themselves a few more months of breathing room. You were going to sacrifice me, I said. Not just my freedom, my honor. You were going to strip me of everything I am just so you didn't have to face the consequences of your own greed. It was the only way, she pleaded. We were trying to save the family. You destroyed the family, I said. I walked past her into my study. I opened the top drawer of my desk. Inside was a manila envelope I had kept there for 2 years. I had hoped I would never need it. I had hoped my suspicions about their marriage were wrong. But I was a man who prepared for the worst. I pulled out the document. It was a petition for divorce. I had paid a lawyer friend to draft it up when I first noticed the bruises on Tyrell's arm that he claimed were from working out, and the way Paige looked at other men when she thought no one was watching. I knew she would drain him dry eventually. I just didn't know she would try to drain me too. I walked back into the hallway and threw the envelope at her. The papers slid across the floor, stopping at her knees. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the legal text. "It is your exit strategy," I said. "Sign them. Sign them and disappear. Leave my son. Leave my grandson. Go find another Mark, because you are done here. I am not signing these," she spat, her fear turning back into venom. "I am not leaving without money." "You are leaving with nothing," I said. "You are leaving because if you are not out of my house in 1 minute, I am going to call Detective Miller and tell him exactly what you just told me. I am going to tell him that you conspired to traffic narcotics and file a false police report against a senior citizen." She stood up, clutching the papers. "You wouldn't." "Try me," I said. "I have nothing left to lose, Paige. You took my son. You took my peace. Do not test me." She looked at me, and for the first time she saw the man who had stared down union busters and strikebreakers. She saw a man made of iron. She grabbed her purse. "You are making a mistake, Elijah. You think you are saving Tyrell. You are burying him." She turned and ran out the door. I watched her go. I slammed the door and locked it. I leaned my forehead against the wood and breathed. I felt old. I felt heavy. Then my cell phone rang. I pulled it out of my pocket. It was Jerome, Eli Jerome said. His voice was tight. Urgency crackled over the line. She just left Jerome, I said. She told me everything. The gambling, the Russians, the setup. Yeah, I know, Jerome said. I found the bookie. It's bad, Eli. But that is not why I am calling. Why are you calling? Did you check your mail today, Eli? No, I said. I haven't been to the box. Go check it, Jerome said. Right now. And bring the letter opener. I frowned. What is it, Jerome? Just go, he said. I dug into the property records like you asked. Tyrell didn't just gamble his own money. He needed a stake to get into the high roller games. He needed collateral. My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. I walked to the front door. I opened it and walked down the path to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. The wind whipped at my clothes. My hands were numb. I opened the metal box. Inside was a single envelope. It was thick. It was certified mail. The return address was a bank I did not bank with. I ripped it open right there on the sidewalk. I pulled out the stack of papers. The header at the top screamed in bold black letters, "Notice of default and intent to foreclose." I scanned the document. My eyes blurred. I saw my name. I saw my address. And I saw a loan amount. $150,000. Taken out 6 months ago, secured against the deed of my home. I looked at the signature line at the bottom. There it was, Elijah Banks. It was a forgery. It was a good one, but it was a forgery. Tyrell. He had stolen the deed from my safe. He had forged my name. He had mortgaged the house my wife died in to play cards with gangsters. I put the phone back to my ear. Jerome, I whispered. I know, Jerome said softly. I saw the filing online. They forged your signature, Eli. They stole your house, and the bank is coming for it. I looked back at my home. The brick facade, the porch where I drank my coffee, the window where Bernice used to wave at me when I came home from work. It wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to a bank I had never stepped foot in. They took it, I said. They took everything. Not yet, Jerome said. We have a fight on our hands. But Eli, you need to know who notarized that loan, who I asked. It was Paige's cousin, Jerome said, the one who works at the title company. It was a family affair, Eli. They all had a hand in the pot. I crushed the letter in my fist. The paper crinkled a dry, dead sound. Come over, Jerome, I said. We have work to do. I am 5 minutes out, he said. I hung up. I walked back up the driveway. I looked at the house that was no longer mine. Anger, hot and white, replaced the cold dread in my stomach. They thought they could take my home. They thought they could sign my name and erase my life. I walked inside and went straight to the kitchen. I picked up the phone book. I looked up the number for the bank on the letterhead. It was a Saturday, but banks had emergency lines. I dialed the number. This is Elijah Banks, I said when the operator answered. You have a fraudulent lien on my property, and I am coming down there on Monday morning to burn it to the ground. I hung up before they could answer. I went to the garage. I looked at the spot where my tackle box had been. I looked at the empty space where Tyrell's car used to sit. You want a war, I said to the empty room. You got one. Monday morning arrived with a gray sky that hung low over Chicago like a wet wool blanket. I stood on the steps of First City Bank at 8:55. I was wearing my Sunday suit, a charcoal double-breasted jacket that was a little tight in the shoulders but still commanded respect. I had shined my shoes until they reflected the gloomy clouds. In my hand I held a black leather briefcase that usually held my Bible and hymn book. Today it held the evidence of my son's treachery. Jerome sat in his car across the street watching. He had offered to come in with me, but I told him no. This was a man's work. A father had to clean up the mess his blood had made. The security guard unlocked the glass doors. I was the first one in. The air inside smelled of carpet cleaner and money. I walked straight to the desk of the branch manager. The nameplate read, Mr. Henderson. He was a young man, maybe 40, with a haircut that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. He looked up surprised to see a 6'2" black man standing over him before he had even had his coffee. Can I help you, sir? He asked, his smile professional, but thin. My name is Elijah Banks, I said. My voice was low and steady. It carried the weight of 30 years on the factory floor. You sent me a letter on Saturday telling me you intend to take my home. I am here to tell you that is not going to happen. Henderson's smile faltered. He typed my name into his computer. His eyes scanned the screen and his expression hardened. Ah, Mr. Banks. I see the file here. The loan is in default. 6 months of non-payment. The foreclosure process is automatic, sir. I am afraid there is nothing I can do at this branch. You need to contact the collections department. He reached for a business card to dismiss me. I did not take it. I placed my briefcase on his desk and snapped the latches open. The sound was loud in the quiet bank. "You are not listening, Mr. Henderson," I said. "I did not take out a loan. I did not sign a mortgage, and I certainly did not authorize you to give $150,000 to a thief who forged my name." Henderson sighed. He looked bored. "Sir, we hear this often. Family disputes are not the bank's problem. We have a notarized signature on file. We have the deed. Everything is legal. If you have an issue with how the funds were used, you need to take that up with the cosigner." "There is no cosigner," I said. "There is just a victim and a negligent bank." I pulled a stack of papers from my briefcase. I slid the first document across the polished wood of his desk. It was the copy of the loan agreement Jerome had pulled from the public records online. "Look at the date," I commanded. "September 12th. That is the date I supposedly walked into this branch and signed away the home my wife and I bought in 1985. Henderson looked at the date. "Yes, September 12th. So what?" I slid the second document across the desk. It was a hospital discharge summary. It was stapled to a surgical report and a bill for $25,000. On September 12th at 10 in the morning, when this document was time-stamped, I was under general anesthesia at Mercy Hospital, I said. I was having a total knee replacement. I was unconscious for 4 hours and in recovery for another 3. Unless your notary came into the operating room and put a pen in my limp hand, I did not sign this. Henderson picked up the medical records. He looked at the dates. He looked at the times. A bead of sweat appeared on his upper lip. He looked back at his computer screen. I laid down the third piece of paper. It was a photograph Jerome had printed out. It showed a woman with red hair laughing at a bar holding a drink. Her arm was draped around Paige. "The notary who stamped this fraud is named Sarah Jenkins," I said. "She is the maid of honor at my daughter-in-law's wedding. She is not an impartial witness. She is a co-conspirator. And unless you want me to walk out of here and go straight to the state attorney general and the local news with proof that your bank facilitates elder fraud, you are going to fix this, right now." Henderson was pale now. He realized the gravity of the situation. He wasn't dealing with a delinquent borrower. He was dealing with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit waiting to happen. He stood up. "Mr. Banks, please come into my office. We need to discuss this privately." I followed him into the glass-walled office. He closed the blinds. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. His hands were shaking slightly. He spoke in hushed, urgent tones. I heard words like potential liability, verified alibi, and immediate freeze. He hung up and looked at me. He looked like a man who was watching his career flash before his eyes. "Mr. Banks, our legal department is reviewing the documents you provided. If what you say is true, and the medical records certainly seem irrefutable, then this is a case of criminal identity theft." "It is," I said. "By my son and his wife. We are going to open an internal investigation immediately," Henderson said. "In the meantime, I have authorization to place a hold on the foreclosure proceedings." "That is not enough," I said. I leaned forward. The chair creaked under my weight. "My son and his wife stole that money. They moved it through accounts in this bank. If you want to prove to me that you are not complicit, you need to stop the bleeding." "What do you want me to do?" Henderson asked. "Freeze them out," I said. "Freeze every account connected to that loan. Freeze Tyrell Banks. Freeze Page Banks. If that money is still in your system, lock it down. Don't let them buy a stick of gum." Henderson hesitated. "That is highly irregular without a court order." "You have a forged deed in your vault," I countered. "That is irregular. If you let them move 1 more cent of the proceeds of a crime you facilitated, I will own this bank by the time the jury is done with you." Henderson nodded. He typed furiously on his keyboard. He hit the enter key with a finality that echoed in the room. "It is done," he said. "All accounts linked to the disbursement of the loan are frozen pending investigation. We have flagged them for fraud. Their cards will be declined. Their online access is revoked." "Thank you," I said. I stood up and closed my briefcase. I didn't shake his hand. I walked out of the bank with my head held high. I had saved my house. But I knew I had just lit a fuse that would blow up what was left of my family. I walked to my truck. The wind was colder now. I got in and checked my phone. I had 5 missed calls from Paige. She had found out. The freeze must have hit instantly. My phone rang again in my hand. It was her. I answered it. "You crazy old man," she screamed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What did you do?" "My card was declined at the gas station. I can't access the checking account. I can't access anything." I started the engine of my truck. The rumble of the motor was a comforting sound. "I went to the bank page," I said calmly. "I told them I was in surgery when the house was sold. They found that very interesting." "You froze the accounts," she shrieked. Her voice was pure terror. "You don't understand what you have done. That money wasn't just for us. We were moving it. We were trying to gather enough to pay the interest." "Pay the interest on the debt you created by stealing my house," I clarified. "Elijah, listen to me," she sobbed. The tone shifted from anger to begging. "They are coming tonight. The people Tyrell owes. They gave us a deadline, noon today. We were supposed to wire $10,000 just to keep them away for another week. If the money doesn't move, they come to the house." "Which house?" I asked. "Yours," she cried. "They know where you live. Tyrell gave them your address as the billing contact. He told them you were holding the cash." I felt a cold chill settle in my gut. My son had not only stolen my home, he had painted a target on my front door. He had told violent men that an old man was sitting on their money. "You killed us," Paige wailed. "You killed us all." "No," I said. "I just stopped you from killing me slowly." I hung up the phone. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 10:30. I had 90 minutes before the deadline, and then the sun would go down and the wolves would come. I called Jerome. "They froze the accounts," I said. "But Paige says the collectors are coming tonight." Tyrell pointed them at my house. "I figured," Jerome said. "I have been sitting here watching the bank. You did good, Eli. But you can't go home. It's not safe." I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were scarred and calloused. They were the hands of a man who had built things, a man who had defended things. "It is my house, Jerome," I said. "It is the only thing I have left. I am not running." "Then we need to fortify," Jerome said. "I am following you. Don't stop for anything." I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going to run. I was going to prepare. I had fought for my life in the jungle 50 years ago. I had fought for my dignity on the assembly line. I wasn't going to let a bunch of street thugs take what was mine. I drove toward the hardware store. I needed supplies. If they were coming to my house tonight, they were going to find a very inhospitable welcome. The bank had been the legal battle. Tonight would be the physical one. And I intended to be the last man standing. I drove back from the hardware store with the bed of my truck weighed down by supplies that had nothing to do with home improvement and everything to do with home defense. I did not call the police. I knew what they would say. They would tell me to file a report. They would tell me to stay somewhere else. They would drive a patrol car past the house once an hour if I was lucky. But a patrol car cannot stop a Molotov cocktail thrown through a window at 3 in the morning. And a police report cannot stop a man who thinks he is owed $200,000. This was something I had to handle myself. I had spent 30 years as a foreman in a plant where machinery could kill you if you lost focus for a second. I knew how to control an environment. I knew how to make a dangerous place safe for me and deadly for anyone else. Jerome met me in the driveway. He helped me unload the coils of steel cable, the buckets of industrial lubricant, and the high-intensity floodlights. We worked in silence. The sun was going down and the temperature was dropping with it. The wind coming off the lake was brutal, a freezing knife that cut through layers of wool and denim. That wind was my ally. I went to the garden shed. I had a heavy-duty irrigation system installed years ago to keep Bernice's prize hydrangeas alive during the summer droughts. In the winter, the pipes were usually drained to prevent bursting. Today, I reversed the process. I hooked up the main intake valve directly to the high-pressure line that fed the garage slop sink. I bypassed the regulators. I positioned the sprinkler heads not toward the garden beds but toward the driveway and the front porch. I adjusted the nozzles from a gentle mist to a hard, direct jet. Jerome watched me work, his breath puffing in the air. "You are going to turn the yard into a skating rink, Eli." I tightened a valve with a wrench. "No, Jerome. I am going to turn it into a freezer." We moved to the driveway. It was a long stretch of concrete leading from the street to the garage. I took the buckets of industrial lubricant, a thick, viscous sludge we used to use on the conveyor belts, and I poured it in strategic patches near the front steps and the garage door. In the dark, it would look like wet pavement. In reality, it was slicker than black ice. Finally, I rigged the lights. I mounted 2 industrial halogen lamps on the roof of the porch, aiming them directly at eye level for anyone walking up the path. I wired them to a single switch inside the hallway. Next to the switch, I set up my old megaphone, the one I used to direct shifts on the factory floor when the machinery was too loud for shouting. By midnight, the house was dark. To anyone watching from the street, it looked like a sleeping giant. The windows were black. The car was in the garage. Silence hung over the neighborhood. But inside, I was sitting in a chair by the front window, a thermos of black coffee on the floor and a tire iron across my knees. Jerome was in the back watching the alley. We waited. The hours ticked by. 1 o'clock, 1:30. The cold seeped through the glass, radiating off the panes. I didn't turn on the heat. I wanted to hear everything. I wanted to be as cold and hard as the trap I had set. At 2:15, a black sedan rolled down the street. It was moving slow, headlights off. It didn't look like a car belonging to anyone who lived here. It stopped 3 houses down. The engine idled for a moment, a low rumble in the night, and then cut off. "Here we go," I whispered to myself. I saw 2 figures get out. They were big men wearing heavy coats and knit caps pulled low. They didn't walk like they were afraid. They walked with the arrogance of men who were used to people being afraid of them. They walked past the neighbor's house and stopped at the edge of my driveway. They looked at the dark house. They probably thought I was asleep. They probably thought I was an easy target. They started up the driveway. One of them was carrying a baseball bat. The other had something heavy in his pocket that dragged down his coat. They bypassed the front walk and headed straight for the garage, likely intending to break in and trash my truck or set a fire to send a message. I waited until they were 20 feet from the house. I waited until they were standing right in the kill zone of the sprinklers. Now. I flipped the first switch. The irrigation system roared to life. It wasn't a gentle hiss. It was the sound of a fire hose engaging. The water hit them with the force of a punch. In the sub-zero temperature, the water was a shock to the system that could stop a heart. It soaked their heavy coats instantly. It drenched their faces, their hands, their weapons. I heard them scream. It was a sound of pure shock. They tried to run forward to get out of the spray, but their feet hit the patches of industrial lubricant. The first man, the one with the bat, went down hard. His feet flew out from under him and he landed flat on his back on the concrete. I heard the crack of the bat hitting the ground. He tried to scramble up, but the water was relentless, pounding him into the slick surface. The water was already starting to freeze on his clothes, turning his coat into a heavy, stiff straitjacket. The second man tried to retreat, but he slipped and fell to his knees. He was crawling, shielding his face from the icy blast. I flipped the second switch. The halogen floodlights exploded into life. They cut through the darkness with a blinding white intensity. The men were pinned in the glare, squinting, covering their eyes, disoriented by the sudden shift from total darkness to interrogation-level brightness. I picked up the megaphone. I didn't shout. I used my foreman voice, the voice that commanded obedience. "Step 1 inch closer and I will blow this yard to kingdom come." It was a bluff. I didn't have explosives, but I had a gas line and they knew it. To them, I was a crazy old man who had trapped them in ice and light. They couldn't see me. They could only hear the voice of God thundering from the house they thought was defenseless. "I have the gas line rigged," I announced, my voice booming over the sound of the rushing water. "1 spark, that is all it takes. Do you want to die for a debt that isn't yours?" The man on the ground managed to slide backward, pushing himself away with his heels. He was shivering violently. The water had soaked through to his skin and the wind chill was turning him into a statue. His partner grabbed him by the collar and dragged him toward the street, slipping and sliding on the oil. They were retreating. They were broken. They had come to intimidate, and they had been met with the elements weaponized by a man who knew how to use them. I watched them scramble back to their car. They fell twice more before they reached the safety of the street. They threw themselves into the sedan, soaking the interior. The engine roared to life, tires spinning on the asphalt as they sped away. I turned off the lights. I turned off the water. The silence returned, but now it was the silence of victory. Jerome came into the front room. He was grinning. "That was biblical Eli," he said. "I haven't seen anything like that since we flooded the tunnels in '68. I didn't smile. I watched the taillights disappear. I knew this wasn't the end. This was just a skirmish. "Go check the garage door, Jerome," I said. "I think they left something before they ran." Jerome went out the side door. I watched him through the window. He shined his flashlight on the white metal of the garage door. He stood there for a moment. Then he came back inside. He didn't look happy. "What is it?" I asked. "Spray paint," Jerome said. "They must have hit it right before the water got them." "What does it say?" Jerome hesitated. Life for life. 3 days. I sat back in my chair. The adrenaline drained out of me, leaving me cold. Life for life. 3 days. They weren't just threatening me anymore. They were threatening a trade. My life for Tyrell's debt. Or maybe Tyrell's life for the debt. Or maybe Leo. I realized then the position I was in. I hated what my son had done. I hated the man he had become. I hated that he had tried to frame me. But if I did nothing, if I just sat here in my fortress and let the clock run out, they would kill him. They would kill him in prison, or they would kill him the moment he got out. Or they would kill my grandson to make a point. I couldn't let that happen. Not because I loved Tyrell. That love was buried under layers of betrayal, but because I was a father. And a father doesn't let the streets execute his son. That was the job of the law. That was the job of the justice system. Tyrell deserved to rot in a cell for 20 years. He deserved to lose his freedom, but he didn't deserve to be butchered by thugs over a gambling debt. If he died, they won. If he died, the debt was settled in blood, but the lesson was lost. I needed him alive. I needed him alive to stand in front of a judge. I needed him alive to look me in the eye and see that I was the one who put him there. I needed him alive so I could strip him of his inheritance legally, so I could ensure he never touched a dime of my money again. I stood up. My knees popped again. 3 days, I said. That is Monday. Jerome nodded. What are you going to do, Eli? I am going to save his worthless life, I said. But not the way he thinks. I went to the kitchen and made a fresh pot of coffee. I needed to think. I needed a plan that would satisfy the debt without paying it, a plan that would protect my grandson, and a plan that would ensure Tyrell spent the next decade in a place where he couldn't hurt anyone else. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. We are going to visit Tyrell, I said. In jail? Jerome asked. Yes, I said. I need to look him in the eye. I need to know exactly how deep this goes. And I need to get it on tape. I went to my bedroom and changed my shirt. I put on a fresh flannel. I grabbed the digital voice recorder I used to use for union meetings. I checked the batteries. They were full. Let's go, Jerome. We walked out into the freezing night. The driveway was a sheet of ice. The smell of oil and fear still hung in the air. I looked at the red spray paint on my garage door. It looked like blood. I got into my truck. I didn't look back. I was going to save my son from the wolves so I could feed him to the lions. The Cook County jail smelled like bleach, unwashed bodies, and hopelessness. It was a smell I knew from my youth, from visiting cousins who had taken the wrong path, but I never thought I would smell it on my own son. I sat on the metal stool on the visitor's side of the thick plexiglass. The room was cold. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a headache in the making. I kept my hands folded on the stainless steel counter. I was wearing my work jacket, the one with the union patch on the shoulder. I wanted Tyrell to remember who raised him. I wanted him to remember the man who worked double shifts so he could have braces and basketball shoes. When the guard brought him out, I barely recognized him. It had been less than 48 hours, but Tyrell looked like he had aged 10 years. His orange jumpsuit was too big for him, hanging off his shoulders like a shroud. His face was a map of violence. His left eye was swollen shut, a purple and black lump the size of a golf ball. His lip was split. There were scratches on his neck. He walked with a limp favoring his right side. He looked like a man who had discovered that his arrogance was not a shield in a place like this. He sat down opposite me. He picked up the phone. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped the receiver. I picked up mine. "Dad," he choked out. Tears started streaming down his face immediately. "Dad, you came. You have to get me out of here. Please. You don't know what it is like in here. They know I am soft. They took my shoes. They took my commissary money. One of the guys in my block, he says I have to pay rent or he's going to break my fingers." I looked at him. I didn't feel the urge to comfort him. I felt a cold, hard distance. This was the man who had tried to plant a felony in my truck. This was the man who had mortgaged my home to pay a bookie. "You look terrible, Tyrell," I said. My voice was steady. "I am dying in here, Dad," he sobbed. "You have to bail me out. The judge set it at $50,000. You have the house. You have the equity. I know you stopped the foreclosure. Paige told me the accounts are frozen. But you can unfreeze them. You can sell the house. Please, Dad, sell the house and get me out. I will pay you back, I swear. I will work for the rest of my life to pay you back." I watched him beg. He was willing to make me homeless to save himself from a few bruises. He hadn't learned a thing. He still thought my life was a resource for him to consume. "The house isn't for sale, Tyrell," I said. "It never was. And even if it was, I wouldn't use the money to bail out a drug trafficker." He slammed his hand against the glass. The guard behind him took a step forward, hand on his baton. Tyrell flinched and cowered. "I am not a drug trafficker," he hissed, leaning close to the glass. "I made a mistake. Just one mistake. One mistake," I repeated. "Forging my signature on a deed is not a mistake. That is a crime. Putting fentanyl in my tackle box is not a mistake. That is attempted murder of my freedom." "Dad, listen," he pleaded. "It wasn't my idea. None of it was my idea. I was desperate. I was scared. I reached into the pocket of my flannel shirt. I felt the small digital recorder I had placed there before I left the house. It was running. I needed this. I needed him to say it. I needed him to absolve me and condemn himself, not for my sake, but for the law." "Who had the idea, Tyrell?" I asked. I leaned in. "Tell me the truth. For once in your life, look me in the eye and tell me exactly how this happened. Who put the drugs in my box? Who signed the papers?" Tyrell looked around the room, paranoid. His eyes darted to the guard, then back to me. He lowered his voice. "It was Paige," he whispered. I waited. I didn't say a word. I let the silence pull the truth out of him. "She set it up," he continued, the words tumbling out now. "She knew about the debt. She knew about the Russians. She said we couldn't pay it back. She said the only way out was to use you. Use me how I asked. She said you were old," Tyrell said. He looked down at the counter, unable to meet my gaze. "She said you had lived your life. She said you didn't need the house anymore. She said if we put the drugs on you, the police would go easy on you because of your age. They would take the drugs, the debt would be wiped because of the seizure, and you would get probation. She said it was a victimless crime." "Victimless," I said. "You were going to give me a record. You were going to ruin my name." "She said it didn't matter," he cried. "She said nobody cares about a retired factory worker. She said you were just taking up space." Taking up space. The words hung in the air between us. That is what I was to them. Space, square footage, a wasted resource, and the nursing home I asked. The application. "That was her too," he said. "She found a doctor, a guy who owes money too. He was going to sign the papers saying you were incompetent. She said if you were in the home, we would get power of attorney automatically. We could sell the house, pay the debt, and have enough left over to move to Florida." I felt a cold rage burning in my stomach. It wasn't just greed, it was hatred. Paige didn't just want money. She wanted me gone. She wanted to erase me. "And Leo?" I asked. "What about my grandson?" Tyrell looked up. His face was twisted with misery. "She said if you were in jail or the home, she would get full custody," he admitted. "She said we could cut you out completely. She wants your life insurance, Dad. She checked the policy. She knows Mom left you a double indemnity clause. She said if you died in prison, it might pay out sooner." I sat back. I had heard enough. I had the confession. I had the motive. I had the conspiracy laid bare. My daughter-in-law was not just a thief. She was a monster who had calculated the value of my death down to the penny. And my son, this weak, pathetic man sitting in front of me, had gone along with it. He had nodded his head. He had signed the papers. He had put the tape on the brick of drugs. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the recorder. The little red light was steady. I pressed the stop button. The click was loud in the quiet space between our phones. Tyrell stared at the device. His eyes went wide. "Dad, what is that?" "It is your insurance policy," I said. "But not the kind you wanted." "You recorded me," he whispered. "Every word I said." Why, he asked. "Why would you do that to me? I am your son." "Because I am done being your victim." "Tyrell," I said. I stood up. My knees popped, but I stood tall. I looked down at him through the glass. "I am not selling the house," I said. "I am not bailing you out. I am going to take this recording to my lawyer, Dr. Montgomery, and then I am going to take it to the district attorney." "Dad, no," he screamed. He stood up, knocking the stool over. "You can't. They will kill me in here, or they will lock me away forever. You are sending me to prison." "You are already in prison, son," I said. "And honestly, it is the safest place for you." "What do you mean?" he stammered. "The Russians came to the house last night," I said. "They painted a message on the garage door. Life for life. 3 days. They want their money, Tyrell. And they know you don't have it. If you walk out of here today, if I bail you out, they will find you. And they will kill you." Tyrell turned pale. The blood drained from his battered face. He He slumped against the glass. They came to the house, he whispered. Yes, I said. And I handled them, but I can't handle them forever. And I won't handle them for you. You created this debt. You created this danger. Now you get to live in the only place they can't reach you. You are leaving me here, he said. He sounded like a child who had been left at the mall. I am keeping you alive, I said. You will stay in custody. You will go to trial. You will likely be convicted based on this recording and the evidence in your car. You will go to a federal facility. It will be hard. It will be ugly, but it will have walls and guards, and the loan sharks can't get to you there. Dad, please, he wept. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was weak. She made me do it. She didn't make you do anything, I said. You are a grown man. You chose her. You chose the cards. You chose the drugs. Now you have to choose to survive. I turned to leave. Dad, wait, he shouted. What about Leo? What about my son? Paige will take him. She will run. I looked back at him one last time. Paige isn't going anywhere, I said. I am coming for her next. And when I am done, Leo will be with the only person who actually gives a damn about him. I hung up the phone. I didn't look back as the guard grabbed Tyrell by the arm and hauled him away. He was screaming my name, but I shut it out. I had done what a father had to do. I had saved his life by sacrificing his freedom. It was a fair trade. I walked out of the jail into the parking lot. Jerome was waiting in the truck. He saw my face and knew I had what we needed. You get it? He asked. I got it, I said. He sang like a bird. It was Paige. All of it. Jerome nodded. Good. Because I got a ping on her location. She is at the apartment, and she is packing. She listed her furniture on Craigslist an hour ago. Fire sale prices. She is running Eli. She thinks she is running, I said. I climbed into the truck. The engine roared to life. I felt a grim satisfaction. The legal case was built. My son was secure, albeit in a cage. Now there was only one loose end left. The mastermind. Let's go, Jerome, I said. I want to say goodbye to my daughter-in-law before she tries to steal my grandson. We drove out of the city, heading toward the rental duplex where Paige and Tyrell lived. The sky was dark, promising snow. It was fitting. A storm was coming, and I was bringing it. Jerome sat in the passenger seat of my truck, the glow of his tablet illuminating his face in the dim light of the afternoon. We were parked down the street from the duplex where my son and his wife lived. It was a gray, clapboard building that had seen better days, much like the people inside it. The wind was picking up, whipping dead leaves against the windshield. She is moving fast, Eli Jerome said, his fingers tapping on the screen. She just sold the living room set for $200. Cash only. Pick up immediately. And she booked the flights. Where to? I asked, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. Cancun, Jerome said. One way. Departs O'Hare at 6:45 tonight. That gives her less than 3 hours. And Leo, I asked. The name of my grandson felt heavy in my mouth. 2 tickets, Eli Jerome confirmed. 1 adult, 1 child. She is taking him. I felt a cold fire in my gut. Taking a child across international borders without the father's consent was kidnapping, but Paige didn't care about laws anymore. She was a rat fleeing a sinking ship, and she was taking my grandson as a shield or a bargaining chip. Maybe she thought she could ransom him back to me later. Maybe she just wanted to hurt me. She cleared out the joint checking account an hour ago, Jerome added. What was left of it anyway. And get this. I tapped into her recent purchases. She didn't buy food. She didn't buy clothes for the boy. She bought a burner phone and sleeping pills. Sleeping pills, I repeated. For the flight, probably, Jerome said grimly. To keep the kid quiet. Eli, she is desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. I put the truck in gear. I didn't wait for another update. I pulled away from the curb and drove the 100 yards to the duplex driveway. A beat-up van was just pulling out the back, loaded with Tyrell's leather sofa. The vultures were already picking the carcass clean. I pulled my truck across the bottom of the driveway, blocking the exit. I turned off the engine. Call Miller, I told Jerome. Tell him we are at the residence. Tell him we have a situation involving a minor and a flight risk. And tell him about the pills. Jerome nodded and put the phone to his ear. I opened my door and stepped out into the cold. The front door of the duplex flew open before I even reached the steps. Paige came stumbling out. She was struggling. She had a large suitcase in one hand, and she was dragging Leo by the arm with the other. My grandson looked small. He was wearing pajamas even though it was 2 in the afternoon. He was barefoot. His face was streaked with tears and snot. He was pulling back, trying to dig his heels into the porch wood. "Mommy, wait," he cried. "My shoes! I need my shoes!" "Shut up," Leo Page snapped. She yanked him so hard he almost fell down the steps. "We don't need shoes. We are buying new ones. Move." She looked up and saw me standing at the bottom of the stairs. She froze. Her eyes went from me to the truck blocking the driveway. She dropped the suitcase. It fell with a heavy thud. "Get out of my way, Elijah," she screamed. I looked at Leo. He was shivering. His lips were blue. He hadn't eaten. I could tell by the hollow look in his eyes. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and hope that broke my heart. "Grandpa," he whispered. "Go back inside, Leo," I said gently. "It is too cold out here for you." He tried to move toward me, but Paige tightened her grip on his wrist. Her fingernails dug into his skin. "He is not going anywhere with you," she hissed. "He is my son. He is a human being, Paige," I said, my voice rising. "Not a piece of luggage. Look at him. He is freezing. He is terrified. You are not taking him to Mexico. You are not taking him anywhere." I took a step up the stairs. Paige reacted with the speed of a cornered animal. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a knife. It wasn't a weapon of war. It was a kitchen knife, a paring blade with a black handle. But it was sharp, and in the hands of a woman who had already tried to frame me for a felony, it was deadly. She pointed it at me. Her hand was shaking. "Stay back," she screamed. "I swear to God, Elijah, I will cut you. I have nothing left to lose. You took everything. You took the money. You took the house. You took Tyrell. You are not taking my freedom." I stopped. I was 3 steps below her. I looked at the knife. I looked at her face. I saw the madness there. She wasn't bluffing. She was past the point of reason. "You did this to yourself, Paige," I said calmly. "I didn't make you gamble. I didn't make you steal. And I certainly didn't make you drag a barefoot child out into the winter to run from your crimes. I am leaving," she said, waving the knife. "Move the truck." "No," I said. "Move it," she shrieked. She pulled Leo closer to her, using him as a barrier between us. The boy whimpered. "Mommy, please. I'm scared." I felt a surge of rage so powerful my vision blurred. She was using him as a shield. "Let him go, Paige," I said. My voice was low, a rumble of thunder. "Put the knife down. Let the boy go. We can talk about this." "There is nothing to talk about," she yelled. "You ruined us." I heard the siren then. It was faint at first, a wail in the distance, but it grew louder quickly. Paige heard it too. Her head snapped toward the street. Panic flooded her eyes. "You called the cops," she accused. "I told you, Paige. I said, I am done playing games." She looked at the street. She looked at me. She looked at the knife in her hand. For a second, I thought she might lunge at me. I braced myself. I was old, but I still knew how to disarm someone. I would take the cut to save the boy. But she didn't lunge. She hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, 2 police cruisers screeched around the corner, lights flashing. They pulled up onto the lawn tires, churning the frozen grass. Doors flew open. Officers poured out, guns drawn. "Drop the knife," one of them shouted. "Drop it now." It wasn't Miller. It was a uniformed sergeant. He didn't know the backstory. He just saw a woman with a knife and a child. Paige looked at the cops. She looked at Leo. She realized it was over. The fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped. The knife clattered onto the wooden porch. She released Leo's arm. Leo didn't wait. He didn't look at his mother. He ran. He scrambled down the stairs, his bare feet slapping on the cold wood. He threw himself at me. I caught him. I wrapped my heavy coat around him, engulfing his small, shivering frame. I lifted him up. He buried his face in my neck, sobbing. "It is okay, Leo," I whispered, stroking his hair. "Grandpa is here. You are safe." The police swarmed the porch. They grabbed Paige. They spun her around and cuffed her. She didn't fight. She just started screaming. Not at them. At me. "I hate you," she howled as they dragged her down the steps. "I hate you. You stole my life." I watched them put her in the back of the cruiser. I didn't feel triumph. I felt exhaustion. Jerome walked up the driveway. He had a small bag in his hand. He had gone into the house while the police were securing Paige. "I found this in her purse inside the door," Jerome said to the sergeant. He held up a clear plastic bag. Inside were pills, lots of them, not in a prescription bottle, loose. And next to them a stack of cash wrapped in a rubber band. That looks like oxy, the sergeant said. And that cash looks like flight money. We also found this, Jerome said, handing the sergeant a piece of paper. It was a note. I read it over the sergeant's shoulder. It was a list. Sell couch, sell TV. Drug Leo for flight. Dump car at airport. Drug Leo. I hugged my grandson tighter. She had written it down. She had planned to sedate him like an animal to smuggle him out of the country. That is child endangerment, the sergeant said, his face hard. Add possession with intent to distribute. Add assault with a deadly weapon. He looked at me. Are you the grandfather? Yes, I said. I am Elijah Banks. Is there anyone else who can take custody of the child, he asked. The father. The father is in county jail, I said. I am all he has. The sergeant nodded. He looked at Leo, who was clinging to me like a lifeline. We will have to call Child Protective Services to formalize it, the sergeant said. But given the circumstances, I don't think anyone is going to argue with you taking him home tonight. Just keep him warm. Thank you, officer, I said. I carried Leo to my truck. I put him in the passenger seat and buckled him in. I turned the heater up to full blast. Grandpa Leo asked, his voice small. Where is Mommy going? She is going away for a while, Leo, I said. She did some bad things. Is she coming back? He asked. Not for a long time, I said. He didn't cry. He just nodded. He looked out the window at the police cars. He looked older than 7. He looked like a Banks. I got in the driver's seat. Jerome climbed in the back. You did it, Eli, Jerome said softly. You got them both. I looked at my grandson. I looked at his bare feet warming up in the heat of the vent. I didn't get them, Jerome, I said. I just stopped them from taking the only thing that matters. I put the truck in gear. We drove away from the duplex. I wasn't going back to my house yet. It was still a crime scene. It was still a target. I was going to take Leo to a hotel. I was going to buy him shoes. I was going to buy him a hot meal. And then I was going to start the long, hard work of raising a man who wouldn't make the same mistakes his father did. The war was over. The cleanup had just begun. The courtroom was packed. The story of the father who framed his son had been too good for the local news to pass up. They called me the godfather of the assembly line. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my hands resting on my knees, my back straight. I wore my Sunday suit, the charcoal one that still smelled faintly of mothballs. I watched as the bailiff led Tyrell in. He looked small. The swagger was gone. The arrogance that had fueled his gambling and his lies had been stripped away by 3 nights in county jail. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the floor, shuffling in his shackles. His lawyer was a public defender named Klein, a man with a cheap suit and a loud voice who clearly saw this high-profile case as his ticket to a private firm. Klein stood up before the judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, who looked like she had no patience for nonsense. Your Honor. Klein boomed, gesturing theatrically at Tyrell. My client is a victim here. He is a young man who has lived his entire life under the thumb of a domineering, manipulative father. Elijah Banks is not the kindly retiree he pretends to be. He is a tyrant. He ran his household like a military camp. The reporters in the back row scribbled furiously. I felt the eyes of the room on my back. Klein continued, his voice rising. Tyrell Banks did not place those drugs in the car. He was forced to transport them. He was acting under extreme duress. He knew that if he refused, his father would cut him off or worse. The drugs belong to Elijah Banks. The truck belongs to Elijah Banks. The debt belongs to Elijah Banks. My client was merely a pawn in his father's game. We request that bail be set at a reasonable amount so this young man can return to his grieving wife and child. I watched Tyrell. He nodded along with the lies, a pathetic bobbing of his head. He was doubling down. He was willing to destroy my reputation, my history, and my freedom just to get a breath of fresh air. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Vance, stood up. Your Honor, the state disputes these characterizations entirely, and to address the issue of bail and flight risk, the state calls Elijah Banks to the stand. A murmur went through the room. Klein looked surprised. He hadn't expected me to testify at a bail hearing. He thought I would hide in shame. I walked to the stand. My steps were heavy but steady. I swore on the Bible. I sat down and adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces, and then I looked directly at my son. He flinched. Mr. Banks, Ms. Vance asked, Did you coerce your son into trafficking narcotics? No, ma'am, I said. My voice was deep and calm. I spent 40 years building cars and raising a family. I have never touched illegal drugs in my life. The defense claims you control your son's movements, she said, that you are the mastermind behind this operation. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I pulled out a small black plastic device. It was an OBD2 scanner, a GPS tracker I had bought online for $50. I couldn't control my son's movements, I said to the courtroom, but I could track them. I held up the device. 3 months ago, Tyrell told me he got a job as a regional sales manager. He said he needed to borrow money for suits. He said he was driving all over the state meeting clients. I was proud of him. But I am an old foreman. I trust, but I verify. I plugged this tracker into the diagnostic port under the dashboard of his Challenger while he was sleeping one night. I wanted to see where he was going. I wanted to see him succeed. I handed a stack of printed papers to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge and the prosecutor. "And what did you find, Mr. Banks?" Ms. Vance asked. "I found lies," I said. Ms. Vance picked up the papers. "Your Honor, according to these logs in the week prior to his arrest, the defendant did not visit a single office building. He did not visit any clients. He visited a warehouse district in the industrial park 5 times, specifically 404 Industrial Way." She paused, letting the address hang in the air. "That address corresponds to a condemned pharmaceutical storage facility that was raided by narcotics officers yesterday, based on an anonymous tip. It is a known distribution hub for the cartel operations in this city." She turned back to me. "And where were you during these times, Mr. Banks?" I pointed to the second page of the document. "On Monday at 2 p.m., when Tyrell was at the warehouse, I was at the senior center playing chess. The director, Mr. Henderson, can verify. On Wednesday at 10 a.m., I was at St. Mark's Church for the food drive. Reverend Lewis has the sign-in sheet. On Friday night, when my son's car was parked at that drug den for 3 hours, I was at home fixing my furnace. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, came over to complain about the noise. She watched me work for 40 minutes. I looked at Klein. He was pale. He was flipping through the pages looking for a way out, but there wasn't one. The data was absolute. The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the evidence is irrefutable. The father has ironclad alibis for every moment the drugs were being acquired. The son was at a known drug distribution center 5 times in a week. The defense's theory that the father is the mastermind is not only insulting, it is demonstrably false. The defendant has no job-significant gambling debts and has attempted to frame an innocent man. He is a flight risk and a danger to the community." Judge Patterson looked at Tyrell over the rim of her glasses. She looked at the GPS tracker sitting on the evidence table. "Mr. Klein," she said, her voice cold, "your motion for reduced bail is denied. Given the quantity of narcotics, the sophisticated attempt to frame a family member, and the clear evidence of ongoing criminal activity, I am remanding the defendant to custody without bail pending trial." Tyrell let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. He slumped forward, his forehead hitting the defense table with a dull thud. He was finished. The narrative was dead. The truth was written in coordinates and timestamps. I stood up. I stepped down from the stand. I didn't look at my son. I didn't look at the reporters. I walked out of the courtroom with my head high. I had cleared my name. I had put my son in a cage to save his life. But as I walked out onto the cold Chicago sidewalk, I didn't feel victory. I felt the vibration of my phone in my pocket. It was a text from Jerome. It was a picture. It was a picture of my garage. Smoke was billowing out of the windows. The roof was caving in. The text read, "They didn't wait for Monday." I put the phone in my pocket. The legal battle was over. The street war had just begun. I woke up to the smell of burning rubber and gasoline. It was a thick, acrid stench that coated the back of my throat. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, not out of fear, but out of instinct. I looked at the digital clock. It was 2 in the morning. The room was flickering with an orange glow that danced across the walls like a living thing. It was not the sunrise. It was coming from the side of the house. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. My garage was an inferno. The flames were licking up the sides of the structure, curling over the roof, reaching for the night sky. The heat radiated through the glass, hot enough to blister paint. My truck, my 1979 Ford F-150. The truck I had bought brand new the year I got promoted to foreman. The truck I had taught Tyrell to drive in. It was inside that garage, along with my tools, my lathe, my saws, The workbench my father had built. 40 years of history was being turned into ash and twisted metal right before my eyes. The loan sharks. They hadn't waited for Monday. They hadn't waited for the 3 days to expire. They saw Tyrell get denied bail on the news. They saw their investment locked in a cage, and they decided to cut their losses and send a message. They were burning me out. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. I turned and ran into the hallway. I went straight to the guest room where Leo was sleeping. He was curled up under a quilt thumb in his mouth, oblivious to the destruction outside. "Leo," I said, shaking him gently. "Wake up, son. We have to go." He opened his eyes, sleepy and confused. "Grandpa, what is that smell?" "It is just a little fire outside, Leo," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Nothing to worry about. But we have to go visit Mrs. Gable next door. Right now." I wrapped him in a blanket and picked him up. He was getting heavy, but adrenaline gave me the strength of a man half my age. I carried him down the stairs and out the back door, away from the heat and the smoke. The cold night air hit us, a sharp contrast to the furnace of the garage. I ran across the frozen lawn to Mrs. Gable's house. She was already on her porch, wrapped in a robe, staring at the flames in horror. She saw me coming and opened her door. "Take him, Martha," I said, handing Leo to her. "Don't let him look. Just take him to the back room and turn on the television." "Elijah, your house," she gasped. "The house is brick, Martha," I said. "It will hold. The garage is gone. Call 911. Tell them everyone is out." She nodded, her face pale, and pulled Leo inside. I watched the door close. My grandson was safe. That was all that mattered. I walked back to my yard. I stood on the driveway, the heat from the fire drying the sweat on my forehead. I watched the roof of the garage collapse inward with a sickening crunch. Sparks flew up into the darkness like angry fireflies. I heard the tires of my truck explode one by one. Boom, boom, like gunshots. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, hard clarity. They had taken my past. They had burned my memories. But they hadn't taken me. A black sedan drove slowly past the house. I saw the silhouette of a man in the passenger seat watching the fire. He turned and looked at me, standing in the driveway, illuminated by the flames. I stared back. I didn't flinch. I memorized the shape of the car. I memorized the arrogance of the slow roll. They wanted to see me broken. Instead, they saw me standing. The sirens wailed in the distance. The fire department was coming. But I had a more important call to make. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had been saving. It wasn't the local police. It wasn't Detective Miller. It was the field office of the FBI. "I need to speak to Agent Vance," I said when the operator answered. "Tell him Elijah Banks is ready to talk. And tell him I have the phone." I sat on the front steps as the firefighters battled the blaze. They sprayed water on the house to keep the fire from spreading, but they let the garage burn. There was nothing left to save. An hour later, a black SUV pulled up behind the fire trucks. 2 agents in suits got out. One of them was Vance, the man who had been coordinating the investigation into the drug ring Tyrell was involved with. He looked tired. He looked at the smoking ruins of my garage and then at me. "Mr. Banks," he said, "we tried to warn you they were dangerous." I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out a plastic bag. Inside was a smartphone. It wasn't mine. It was an expensive model with a cracked screen. "I found this in Tyrell's old bedroom 3 days ago," I said. "I was looking for the deed to the house. I found this taped under his drawer instead. It is his burner." I charged it up. "It is not password protected." Vance took the bag. He looked at the phone. "What is on it?" he asked. "Everything I said. Every text message. Every call log. Every threat. He has names stored in there. He has addresses for drop-offs. He has photos of the money he owed. And he has a thread of messages from a man named Kovar." "Kovar," Vance repeated. His eyes widened. "The last message from Kovar came 2 days ago," I said. "It said if Tyrell didn't pay, they would burn his father's house down." Vance looked at the fire, then back at the phone. "This is the link we have been missing. This connects the street dealers to the hierarchy. Mr. Banks, this is enough for a RICO warrant." "Good," I said, "because I am done waiting for the law to catch up. I want them gone. Tonight." Vance nodded. He handed the phone to his partner. "Get this to cyber immediately. I want warrants in an hour." He turned back to me. "Mr. Banks, you can't stay here. This creates a significant escalation. They tried to intimidate you. When they realize it didn't work, they might try something more direct. We can put you and your grandson in protective custody. We can move you to a safe house until the trial." I looked at my house. The siding was melted on one side. The windows were cracked from the heat. The garage was a pile of black charcoal. but the foundation was solid. The bricks were still standing. "No," I said. "Mr. Banks, please," Vance urged. "These are violent men." "I am a violent man too, Agent Vance," I said. "Or I used to be. I fought in a war before you were born. I worked on a line where molten steel could take your arm off. I raised a son who turned into a monster, and I put him in prison myself. I am not running from a bunch of punks with gasoline cans." "But your grandson," Vance said. "My grandson stays with me," I said, "but I am not staying here alone." I took out my checkbook. It was the book for the savings account, the account I had built over 40 years, the account Tyrell and Paige had tried to steal, the account that held $200,000. "I want you to call a private security firm," I said. "The best one you know. I want ex-military. I want guys who know how to shoot. I want a perimeter around this house 24 hours a day until every single one of those men is in handcuffs." Vance looked at me. He saw I wasn't bluffing. "That will be expensive, Elijah." "I have the money," I said. "My children wanted it. They tried to kill me for it. They tried to rot my brain for it. Well, now I am going to spend it. I am going to spend every dime of their inheritance to make sure they never see daylight again." Vance smiled. It was a grim, respectful smile. "I know a firm," he said. "They hire former SEALs. They are expensive, but they are effective. Call them," I said. "Tell them to bring heavy gear." By sunrise, the fire was out. The ashes were cold, but the street was busy. The FBI raided the warehouse district at 6 a.m. Using the data from Tyrell's phone, they located the central hub of Kovar's operation. They kicked down doors. They seized assets. They found the money, the drugs, and the ledgers. I watched it on the news from my living room. I saw men in windbreakers hauling Kovar out of his mansion. I saw the piles of cash. I saw the end of the empire that had threatened my family. Outside my window, 2 men in tactical gear were patrolling my yard. A black SUV was parked at the end of the driveway, engine running. My house was a fortress. I made breakfast for Leo, pancakes and bacon. He ate quietly, looking out the window at the burnt garage. "Grandpa," he said, "is the bad man gone?" "Yes, Leo," I said. "The bad men are all gone." He looked at the security guard walking past the window. "Are those soldiers?" he asked. "They are friends," I said. "They are here to make sure we sleep tight." I drank my coffee. I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret was out. The burden of protecting my ungrateful son was gone. The money I had hoarded for a rainy day was finally being put to good use. It wasn't buying a beach house. It wasn't buying a sports car. It was buying peace of mind. I picked up the phone and called Jerome. "It is done," I said. "I saw the news," Jerome said. "They got Kovar. They got the lieutenants. Tyrell is going to have a lot of new friends in federal prison." "Good," I said. "What now, Eli?" Jerome asked. "Now we rebuild," I said. "I am going to clean up this mess. I'm going to fix the garage, and I am going to raise this boy to be a better man than his father." I hung up. I looked around my kitchen. It smelled of bacon and coffee, not smoke. It smelled like home. I was Elijah Banks. I was still standing, and I wasn't going anywhere. 3 months passed before the snow finally melted in Chicago. The gray sludge on the streets gave way to wet pavement and the first green shoots of grass pushing through the frozen mud in my backyard. I spent those months rebuilding. I hired a contractor, a good man named Marcus, who used to work the line with me to clear the debris of the garage. We poured a new concrete slab. We framed new walls. The smell of sawdust finally replaced the smell of ash. It was slow work, but it was good work. It kept my hands busy and my mind off the empty bedroom upstairs where my son used to sleep. I had not visited Tyrell since the day I walked out of the county jail. I paid his legal fees for a decent defense attorney, not the public defender, because every man deserves a fair fight, but I did not go to the hearings. I did not answer the collect calls that came in the middle of the night. I needed distance. I needed to know if the silence would break him or heal him. Then the letter came. It arrived in a plain white envelope with the return address of the Federal Correctional Facility stamped in red ink. The handwriting was shaky, barely recognizable as the penmanship I had drilled into him during homework sessions at the kitchen table. I took it out to the porch. I sat in my rocking chair with a cup of coffee and opened it. "Dear Dad," it began. There were no excuses this time. No stories about bad luck or misunderstandings. No requests for money. It was 3 pages of raw, unfiltered pain. Tyrell wrote about the first month inside. He wrote about the sickness. He confessed something I had suspected but never wanted to admit. He wasn't just selling the pills, he was taking them. He had been hooked on painkillers since a minor car accident 3 years ago, and when the prescriptions ran out, he turned to the street. The gambling wasn't for thrills. It was to chase the high. The debt wasn't for luxury. It was for maintenance. He described the withdrawal in his cell, the sweating, the shaking, the feeling that his bones were trying to escape his skin. He wrote that he screamed for 3 days straight. He wrote that he wanted to die, but he didn't. He came out the other side, and for the first time in 3 years, his brain was quiet. The noise of the addiction was gone, leaving only the silence of his guilt. I read the part about Leo 3 times. I dream about him every night, Tyrell wrote. I dream about the day I taught him to ride a bike. I dream about his laugh. And then I wake up and I see the bars and I remember that I was willing to let his mother drug him and drag him to Mexico. I remember that I was willing to let you go to prison so I could keep getting high. Dad, I am a monster. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I am sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I finally see what I broke. I folded the letter. I put it in my pocket. I looked out at the new framing of the garage. It was strong. It was straight. It was time to see if my son could be rebuilt too. The next Sunday I put on my suit. I drove the 3 hours to the federal penitentiary downstate. I did not bring Leo. He asked to come. He missed his daddy. But I told him that his daddy was in a timeout for grown-ups and he wasn't ready for visitors yet. I wouldn't let my grandson see his father in a cage until I was sure the man inside the cage was actually his father and not the addict who had tried to destroy us. The visiting room was different here. It was quieter. The security was tighter. There was no glass partition this time, just a wide table with a low barrier in the middle to prevent passing contraband. I sat and waited. When Tyrell walked in, I didn't recognize him at first. He had lost 30 pounds. His face was gaunt, his cheekbones sharp against his skin. His hair was cut short. He walked with his hands clasped behind his back, head bowed. He sat down opposite me. He didn't reach out. He didn't smile. He just looked at me with eyes that were clear, sad, and incredibly old. "Hello, Dad," he said softly. "Hello, Tyrell," I said. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't think you would." "I got your letter," I said. He nodded. He looked at his hands on the table. They were clean, but his fingernails were bitten down to the quick. "It is true," he said. "All of it. I was sick, Dad. But that is not an excuse. I made the choices. I chose the pills over you. I chose the pills over Leo." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a photograph. It was a picture Marcus had taken of the garage the morning after the fire. It showed the blackened skeleton of the structure, the melted siding of the house, and the twisted, scorched metal of my truck. I slid it across the table. Tyrell looked at it. He flinched as if the paper was hot. "This is what you left me," I said. "This is your legacy, Tyrell. You didn't just break my heart. You burned down my history. That truck was the first new thing I ever bought. That garage was where I taught you to change your oil." Tyrell stared at the photo. His shoulders began to shake. A tear hit the glossy paper. Then another. He didn't make a sound, but he was weeping. It wasn't the loud performative sobbing of the county jail. This was a silent, deep grief. He traced the image of the burnt truck with his finger. "I am so sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I am so sorry." I watched him. I looked for the deception. I looked for the angle. I didn't see one. I saw a man who had hit rock bottom and found it was made of solid rock. "I am rebuilding it," I said. "Marcus is helping me. It will be stronger than before. Fire-resistant materials, better wiring." Tyrell looked up. "You are rebuilding?" he asked. "I am," I said, "because that is what we do. We build. We don't run." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "How is Leo?" he asked. "He is good," I said. "He is in school. He is seeing a counselor to talk about why his mom and dad aren't there. He asks about you." Tyrell swallowed hard. "What do you tell him?" "I tell him the truth," I said. "I tell him his father made bad choices, and he is paying for them. But I also tell him that his father loves him. Because I have to believe that underneath the addiction you still do." "I do," Tyrell said. "I love him more than anything. That is why I need to stay here. I can't be near him until I am fixed." I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. I laid it on the table next to the photo of the fire. "This is why I came, Tyrell," I said. He looked at the document. "Last will and testament of Elijah Banks." "You cut me out," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. He didn't sound angry. He sounded resigned. "I did," I said. "But not the way you think." I opened the document to the section on assets. "I liquidated the savings account," I said. "The money you tried to steal. I put it into an irrevocable trust. I added the insurance policy. I added the house. Everything I own, everything I worked for, is in that trust." "And who is the beneficiary?" he asked. "Leo," I said. Tyrell closed his eyes and nodded. "Good. That is good. He deserves it." "I am not finished," I said. "Read the clause at the bottom." He leaned forward and read. His lips moved silently. "I set it up so you cannot touch a penny," I explained. "Not for legal fees, not for commissary, not for a new car when you get out. You get nothing. The trust pays for Leo's education. It pays for his first home. It pays for his start in life." I paused. However, I continued. "There is a clause. When Leo turns 30, if you are still alive and if you have proof of 10 consecutive years of sobriety and if Leo consents, the trust can release a stipend to you, a pension, enough to keep you from starving." Tyrell looked at me. He looked shocked. 10 years, he said. 10 years after you get out, I clarified. You have to prove you can live in the world without destroying it. You have to work. You have to be a father. You have to be a man. If you can do that, my money will help you in your old age. If you can't, if you go back to the pills or the cards, you die broke. Tyrell stared at the paper. He took a deep breath. "It is fair," he said. "It is more than fair. I don't deserve it." "No, you don't." I agreed. "But Leo deserves a father who isn't living in a cardboard box. This isn't for you, Tyrell. It is for him. I don't want him to have to carry you. I want the money to carry you so he doesn't have to." Tyrell looked me in the eye. For the first time in years, the fog was gone. The eyes looking back at me were the eyes of the boy I had raised, sad or broken, but present. "I accept it, Dad," he said. "I will sign whatever you need. I don't want the money. I just want to earn my way back to the table, even if it takes 20 years. "It might," I said. I stood up. I put the document back in my briefcase. I left the photo of the burnt garage on the table. "Keep that," I said, pointing to the picture. "Tape it to your cell wall. Look at it every day. Remember what greed does. Remember what fire does. And remember that I rebuilt it." "I will." "Dad," he said. I turned to leave. "Dad," he called out. I stopped. "Thank you," he said, "for saving me. You were right. If you had bailed me out, I would be dead. The Russians, they sent a message to me in here. They said they can't touch me while I am federal property. You saved my life." I nodded. I didn't smile. "Don't waste it, Tyrell," I said. I walked out of the prison. The sun was shining. The air was crisp. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had lost a son, but I had gained a prisoner who might become a man one day. I got into my truck. I had a grandson to pick up from school. I had a garage to finish framing. I had a life to live. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. The trial of Paige Banks began on a Tuesday in late May. The courtroom was air-conditioned to a shivering chill, but the atmosphere was suffocating. I sat in the front row directly behind the prosecutor's table. I wore my charcoal suit, the same one I had worn to put my son away. My hands rested on my knees, still and heavy like stones. Beside me sat Jerome, his eyes scanning the room, ever the watchman. Paige made her entrance not like a criminal, but like a martyr. She had shed the designer clothes and the sharp heels. She wore a simple, faded cardigan that swallowed her small frame and a skirt that reached her ankles. Her hair, usually dyed and styled to perfection, was pulled back in a severe, messy bun that highlighted the pale, makeup-free skin of her face. She looked frail. She looked terrified. She looked like a victim. Her lawyer was a man named Sterling, a high-priced shark paid for, I assumed, by selling off the last of her hidden assets, or perhaps by the same people she had worked for. He moved around the courtroom with the grace of a dancer. He painted a picture that made my stomach turn. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper, "you see here a woman who was trapped, a woman who was terrified. Her husband, a drug addict and a gambler, owed money to violent men. He threatened her child. What choice did she have but to go along with his desperate schemes? She is not a mastermind. She is a mother who is trying to save her son from a war zone created by the men in her life. He pointed a finger at Tyrell's empty chair, then swept his hand toward me. She was surrounded by domineering, controlling men, Sterling continued. A husband who lost their savings. A father-in-law who hoarded his wealth while his family drowned. Paige Banks did not want to hurt anyone. She just wanted to escape. I watched the jury. I saw them nodding. I saw a young woman in the back row dab her eyes with a tissue. Paige had her head bowed, her shoulders shaking with silent practice sobs. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She was erasing the truth with every tear. She was turning herself into the heroine of a tragedy she had written. For 3 days I listened to her lies. She took the stand on Thursday. Her voice was barely a whisper. She talked about how Tyrell forced her to buy the drugs. She talked about how she only packed the suitcase to save Leo from the loan sharks. She cried when she talked about Leo, saying she only wanted to take him to Disneyland, not Mexico. She claimed the sleeping pills were for herself because she was too anxious to sleep. The jury ate it up. I could feel the tide turning. They looked at me with suspicion now. I was the rich grandfather who let his family suffer. I was the cold man who called the police on a scared mother. On Friday, the prosecutor, Ms. Vance, called her final witness. The state calls Elijah Banks to the stand. I stood up. My knees popped in the silence of the room. I walked to the witness box. I swore the oath. I sat down. I looked at Paige. She finally looked up. Her eyes were wet, but behind the tears I saw a flicker of triumph. She thought she had won. She thought her narrative was unbreakable. Mr. Banks, Ms. Vance said, "You have heard the defendant's testimony. She claims she was coerced. She claims she had no knowledge of a plan to harm you physically. She claims her only goal was to protect her son. Is that true?" "No, ma'am," I said. My voice filled the room deep and resonant. "It is not true." The defense attorney Sterling stood up. "Objection. The witness is speculating on the defendant's state of mind." "Sustained," the judge said. "Mr. Banks, stick to the facts." I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a small silver USB drive. I held it up. "I have a fact, Your Honor," I said. Ms. Vance looked surprised. She didn't know about this. I hadn't given it to her before. I hadn't trusted anyone with it until this exact moment. "What is that?" Mr. Banks, the judge, asked, peering over her glasses. "This is a recording," I said. "From my kitchen." Sterling was on his feet instantly. "Objection. Surprise evidence. We have not had a chance to review this." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I found this 3 days ago. I was tearing out the drywall in my kitchen to fix the fire damage. I found an old voice-activated recorder I had dropped down the vent behind the refrigerator 6 months ago. I used to use it to record my grocery lists because my memory isn't what it used to be. I forgot it was there. But it kept recording every time there was a loud conversation in my kitchen." The judge looked at Sterling, then at me. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Banks, but given the gravity of the charges, I will allow a recess for counsel to review the evidence." We broke for an hour. I sat in the hallway. Sterling and Paige went into a conference room. I saw Sterling come out 10 minutes later. His face was gray. He looked like a man who had just swallowed a stone. He went to the prosecutor. He whispered something. Ms. Vance shook her head firmly. We went back into the courtroom. The jury was seated. The air was electric. "The state enters Exhibit G into evidence," Ms. Vance said. An audio recording dated February 14th, 3 weeks before the incident. She pressed play on the court's sound system. There was a hiss of static, then the sound of a chair scraping against tile, and then Paige's voice. It wasn't the soft, trembling voice of the victim on the stand. It was cold. It was hard. It was the voice of the woman who had screamed at me in my garage. "I am telling you, Gary," she said on the tape, "the old man won't die. He is like a cockroach. I stopped giving him his heart medication for a week and he didn't even get dizzy." A man's voice laughed. It wasn't Tyrell. It was a deeper, rougher voice. "So what is the plan, babe? The loan is due." "The plan is," the fentanyl Paige said, "we frame him. He goes to jail. The stress kills him. Or he rots there. Either way, I get the house. I get the insurance. Tyrell is weak. He won't do what needs to be done. But I will." There was a pause on the tape. Then Paige spoke again, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper that echoed in the silent courtroom. "And if the drugs don't work, Gary, I am going to the hardware store." I looked it up. Rat poison in gumbo covers the taste of the bitter almonds. It looks like a heart attack. No autopsy for a 70-year-old man. He eats, he sleeps, he dies. And I am free. The recording ended with the sound of a door slamming. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a physical weight. The jury members looked at the speaker, then they looked at Paige. Their faces were masks of horror. The young woman in the back row had her hand over her mouth. Paige was frozen at the defense table. Her face had drained of all color. Her mouth hung open. The mask had not just slipped, it had shattered. Mr. Sterling put his head in his hands. He didn't look at his client. He knew it was over. Paige stood up. Her chair fell backward with a loud clatter. "That is fake," she screamed. Her voice was shrill, piercing. "That is not me. He made it up. He used a computer. He is trying to frame me." "Sit down," Ms. Banks, the judge, ordered, banging her gavel. "No," she shrieked. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "I hate him. Look at him. He is sitting there like a king. He has millions, millions of dollars, and he wouldn't give us a dime. He watched us drown. He deserves to die. He deserves to eat poison." The courtroom erupted. The jury gasped. Paige had just confirmed the tape in a fit of rage. She had confessed in open court. "Bailiffs, restrain the defendant," the judge shouted. 2 officers moved in. Paige fought them. She was a wildcat, scratching and kicking. "I should have killed you when I had the chance," she screamed at me as they dragged her away from the table. "I should have pushed you harder off that cliff." I sat in the witness box. I didn't flinch. I watched her unravel. I saw the monster underneath the skin finally claw its way out for everyone to see. The judge called a recess, but the verdict was already written in the air. When we returned, the jury deliberated for less than 20 minutes. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, drug trafficking. The judge asked Paige if she had anything to say before sentencing. Paige stood up. She was handcuffed now. Her hair was loose, falling over her face. She looked at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, only pure distilled hatred. "I hope you rot, Elijah," she spat. The judge looked down at her. She adjusted her glasses. "Ms. Banks, your conduct has been reprehensible. You plotted to kill a man who took you into his home. You used your own child as a pawn. You attempted to corrupt the justice system to frame an innocent senior citizen. There is no rehabilitation for the kind of malice you have displayed." The judge took a breath. "I sentence you to 20 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. You will not see your son grow up. You will not spend his inheritance. You will spend the next 2 decades in a cell thinking about the poison you tried to serve others." Paige screamed. It was a long, animalistic sound of despair. She was dragged out of the courtroom, her heels dragging on the floor, leaving scuff marks on the wood. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. Ms. Vance walked over to me. She looked exhausted, but satisfied. "It is over, Mr. Banks," she said. "You are safe." "Thank you," I said. I walked out of the courthouse. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. The air was warm. Spring had finally arrived. Jerome was waiting by the truck. He opened the door for me. 20 years, I said. Jerome nodded. Justice. I got in the truck. I looked at the empty seat next to me. It was waiting for Leo. I was going to pick him up from his therapy session. We were going to get ice cream, and then we were going to go home. To a house that was safe. To a future that was ours. I started the engine. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I looked forward to the road ahead. It was clear. The water of Lake Geneva was like a sheet of hammered copper reflecting the late afternoon sun. It was quiet here. There were no sirens wailing in the distance. There were no screeching tires on asphalt. There was only the rhythmic lap of water against the hull of the boat and the distant cry of a hawk circling the pines on the shore. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like pine needles and clean water, not smoke and betrayal. It had been exactly 1 year since the fire took my garage. It had been 1 year since I watched the judge sentence my daughter-in-law to 2 decades in a federal cell. We were 300 miles away from Chicago. I had sold the house. It went fast. Even with the fire damage to the garage, the property value was high, just like Paige had predicted. But she never got to spend a dime of it. I took the check from the sale and I drove north. I bought a cabin near the water. It was smaller than the old brick house. It didn't have a formal dining room or a finished basement. But it had peace. And it had walls that didn't hold the echoes of my son's lies. I looked at the boy sitting in the bow of the boat. Leo was 8 now. He had grown 3 inches in the last 12 months. His skin was darker from days spent running outside in the sun. He wasn't the pale, shivering child I had pulled off that porch in the winter. He was filling out. His shoulders were getting broad, just like mine were at his age. He was wearing a life jacket and holding a fishing rod with a focus that made me smile. He looked like a Banks. I adjusted the brim of my hat and reeled in my line a few feet. I thought about the journey that had brought us here. It hadn't been easy. The first few months were filled with nightmares. Leo would wake up screaming for his mother. I would wake up reaching for a baseball bat that I no longer needed to keep by the bed. We went to therapy. We sat in small rooms and talked about abandonment and trust. I learned how to be a father all over again, but this time to a boy who had seen too much of the world's ugly side too soon. But we made it. We built a routine. School at 8, homework at 4, dinner at 6, and fishing on the weekends. We didn't talk about the past often. We lived in the present. We lived in the safety I had bought with my silence and my strength. Leo turned to me. His line was slack, drifting in the current. He wasn't watching the bobber. He was watching me. His eyes were dark and serious, too serious for a boy his age. "Grandpa," he said. "Yeah, Leo," I answered. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask me anything, son." "You know that." He hesitated. He looked down at his sneakers, then back at me. "Is my dad a bad man?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. I had been dreading this question. I had been preparing for it. But hearing it out loud in the middle of this beautiful lake felt like a punch to the gut. I could have lied. I could have told him his father was a hero who made a mistake. I could have told him his father was sick. I could have told him his father was a victim of his mother. But I had promised myself one thing when I took custody of this boy. No more lies. The Banks family had been destroyed by lies. We would be rebuilt on the truth. I put my rod down. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. I looked him in the eye. "Your dad is not a bad man, Leo," I said slowly. "But he is a weak man." Leo frowned. "What does that mean?" "Like he isn't strong. He used to lift weights." I shook my head. "No, son. Not that kind of strength. I am talking about the strength inside, the strength to do the right thing even when it is hard. The strength to tell the truth even when it costs you money. The strength to protect your family instead of using them." I looked at the water. I thought about Tyrell in his cell. I thought about the letters he sent every week. They were getting better, more honest. Everyone has a choice. "Leo," I continued, "every day you wake up, you have a choice. You can choose the easy way or the right way. Your dad chose the easy way. He chose to take things that weren't his because he didn't want to work for them. He chose to listen to people who told him he deserved more than he earned. And when things got hard, instead of standing up and facing it, he tried to run. He tried to hide. And he hurt people because he was scared." Leo absorbed this. He twisted the handle of his fishing rod. "Is Mom weak too?" he asked. That was a harder question. Paige wasn't weak. She was something else. "Your mother made choices too," I said carefully. "She chose to be angry. She chose to want things more than she wanted to be safe. And she chose to break the rules to get them. That is not weakness, Leo. That is wickedness. And there is a difference. Weakness can be fixed. Wickedness has to be stopped." Leo looked at the water. "Am I going to be weak, Grandpa? Am I going to be like Dad?" I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. It was solid. "No," I said firmly. "You are not going to be weak. Do you know why?" "Why?" he asked. "Because you know what happens when you make bad choices," I said. "You saw it. You lived it. And because I am here to teach you the difference. Your dad didn't listen to me when he got older. He thought he knew better. But you are listening. And you have a heart, Leo. I saw you trying to protect your mom even when she was doing wrong. That is loyalty. We just have to make sure you give your loyalty to the right people." I picked up my rod again. I reeled in the line completely. The hook was bare. The worm was gone. "Bring your line in, Leo," I said. "Let me show you something." He reeled his line in. His hook was bare too. "See this knot?" I asked, pointing to the swivel where the hook connected to the line. "Yeah," he said. "This is a Palomar knot," I said. "It is the strongest knot there is. If you tie it right, the line will break before the knot slips. But you have to be patient. You have to wet the line before you cinch it down. If you rush it, the friction burns the line, and it snaps when you get a big fish." I pulled a new hook from my vest. "Your dad rushed the knot, Leo. He wanted the big fish without doing the work. He burned his line. But you, I am teaching you to tie it right. We are going to take our time. We are going to do it step by step. And when you hook something big, you are going to hold on to it." I guided his small hands as he threaded the line through the eye of the hook. I watched him loop it, twist it, and pull it tight. He was focused. He was careful. "There," I said. "That is a good knot. That will hold." He smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached his eyes. "Thanks, Grandpa." We baited our hooks and cast them back out. We sat in silence for a while, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was a companionable one. We were two men separated by 60 years, bound by blood and survival. I looked down at the floor of the boat. My tackle box was sitting there. It was the same plastic box Tyrell had used to hide the drugs. I hadn't thrown it away. I had scrubbed it with bleach. I had left it out in the sun for 3 days. I had reclaimed it. I reached down and unlatched it. The sound was a sharp click in the quiet afternoon. I opened the lid. Inside, the trays were organized perfectly. Shiny silver spoons, colorful rubber worms, sharp, clean hooks, weights of various sizes. There were no dark packages wrapped in electrical tape. There were no secrets. There was no betrayal hiding under the bottom tray. It was just a box of tools for catching fish. I stared at the contents. For a moment I saw the ghost of the fentanyl brick. I felt the phantom weight of the sin my son had tried to place on me. But then the image faded, replaced by the clean reality of the present. I had taken the poison out of our lives. I had sanitized the container. I looked out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I closed my eyes for a second. I felt a breeze touch my cheek, warm and gentle. It felt like Bernice. I hadn't felt her presence in the old house for a long time. The tension and the lies had driven her spirit away. But here on this water I felt her. She was smiling. I knew she was. She had watched me walk through the fire. She had watched me put our son in prison to save his soul. She had watched me fight for her grandson, and she was proud. I had protected the last drop of our blood that was still pure. I had saved the line. A sound broke my reverie. It was the crunch of tires on gravel on the road that ran along the lakeshore. I turned my head. A police cruiser was driving slowly along the perimeter road. It was a county sheriff's vehicle, white with a gold star on the door. My heart didn't jump. My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't sweat. A year ago, seeing a police car meant fear. It meant my son was in trouble. It meant I was a suspect. It meant my life was under siege. But today it was just a car. It was just a man doing his job, patrolling a quiet lake on a Tuesday evening. I had nothing to hide. My license was clear. My conscience was clear. My tackle box was just a tackle box. I raised my hand. I waved at the deputy. He saw me. He tapped his horn once, a friendly toot, and waved back. He continued down the road, disappearing behind the pines. I let out a long breath. I looked at Leo. He hadn't even noticed the police car. He was watching his bobber, waiting for a bite. "Grandpa, I think I got one," he shouted, the rod tip bending. "Reel him in, son," I said, reaching for the net. "Keep the line tight. Don't let him go." Leo cranked the handle. He fought the fish. He struggled, but he didn't give up. He pulled a beautiful bass out of the water, flashing silver and green in the sunlight. I scooped it up in the net. We high-fived. We laughed. The sound echoed across the water, a sound of pure joy. I am Elijah Banks. I am 69 years old. I have lost a wife. I have lost a son. I have lost a home. But looking at my grandson holding that fish, I knew I hadn't lost myself. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. I was ready for it. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what is the hardest decision you have ever had to make to protect your family? Until next time, keep your line tight and your eyes open. The biggest lesson I learned is that blood does not make a family. Loyalty does. For years, I thought being a good father meant shielding my son from the consequences of his actions. I was wrong. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them fall so they can learn how to stand. I had to break my own heart to save my dignity and secure my grandson's future. You cannot build a home on a foundation of lies, and you cannot save someone who is determined to drown you. If you are holding on to toxic people just because you share a last name, let go. Save yourself first. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and resilience. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make a tough decision to cut off a family member to protect your peace? I read every single one. Until next time.